Hello, hello.
Hello. We are
People see
live.
us? No, they can't see us. We are live, but they can't see us. I don't know why. Oh, it's still feeding into it. Yeah, cool. All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Magic Without Fears, the Hermetic podcast, episode 98, interview 98 with Ike Baker. And it looks like we will appear on your screens very shortly. It's just counting down, it seems. I'm still new to StreamYard. This is my second time using this. Yeah, this software.
How do you like it?
I do like it. And I started using it because oh look at that. I think I know what's wrong. I had this figured out last time.
Hey.
There we go.
Look at that.
Here we are. Welcome, Ike. And yeah, I've been enjoying StreamYard. But I only started using it because my computer couldn't handle OBS. But now I have all my sister's tech and computers and all that stuff. So I've got more of that stuff than I can shake a stick at. So I can run OBS on her brand new laptop and stuff, which is sort of, I don't know what to say. Let's just move on from that.
Yeah, well,
so yeah, I'll be learning OBS when I can.
Again, I just want to really sincerely thank you for making the time to do this and to come back and to chat specifically with me. I feel honored, man. And, we had a really incredible talk actually, to be honest with you, that last chat you and I had, it was the fastest, I don't know. You're probably aware on YouTube, you post something and it will just get a couple thousand views and then kind of plateau for a little while. And that it got to like 2,500 views, like quicker than any other podcast episode that I've had. So, I mean, I don't know if the chemistry was good or you're a pretty big deal, but I'm just really happy. I'm honored to be here. I love talking to you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation as well, and couldn't wait to get to pick your brain and hear more about your life and work in the traditions that we love. And as for last time, well, when for those who don't know, this is the first time I've said it on the podcast. For those who don't know, on April 6th, my sister died. Base jumping in Italy. There's newspaper articles about it. You can look it up. It's on my YouTube. For those who don't know, that's what happened. And that's why, yes, my life's been a mess since then. And we're in a lot of pain. But when that happened, yeah, I was very much on a roll, right? Doing all this promotion for EnokiaCon and all that other stuff. And I've been really trying to find new ways to leverage my podcast audience for things I do on YouTube, since I started putting stuff on YouTube a couple of years ago. Because I was like, oh, I may as well, right? I may as well. It wasn't something. I'm never going to be the kind of person who's like looking to see what's hot on YouTube and then make a video for YouTube. That's not my interest. Like what's trending? No. I don't care what's trending.
Good.
But I was on a roll, and definitely with promotions for the EnokiaCon. So I was doing some a ton of promotion for EnokiaCon. So the episode, that's why I wanted your episode to come out sooner rather than later, so those promotions would tie in with that. And also trying to like, there's people don't understand, there's actually not a lot of crossover between podcast audiences and YouTube or video audiences. People think there is, but there isn't. So like my podcast gets 5,000 to 10,000 downloads every month. Like, where's that audience on my YouTube? They're not there. So also my YouTube, I am shadow banned. I shouldn't even say that right now because we are live on YouTube, and that will but I am. That is a fact, and which is just a form of suppression and lack of recommendation by the algorithms. All of these things are things you're not meant to say at the beginning of a YouTube live stream, but whatever. As long as we don't swear, we're good. And so, being on some other people's podcasts really helps because they're not suppressed, right? YouTube has no reason to suppress you. Whereas, on my podcast, I spent all of COVID doing fake ads for adrenochrome and stuff. just silly things to pass the time because it was illegal to work and they were throwing us out of our homes. So it was scary.
look,
And we were angry.
I was a musician for a really long time, and so I know what you're talking about but I mean, if I started to care about stuff like that, I mean, I notice it, but if I started to prioritize that stuff again, I mean, I would just lose my mind. None of this would be worth it even remotely at that point. So I'm just happy to be here talking with you because really, I mean, uh, it's not that often that you get to talk to somebody who, like you, to your point, the last time we spoke, that has run Golden Dawn temples and has been a practitioner in the system for as long as you have, and kind of knows everybody and everybody knows them. So it's really fun to be able to talk to an initiator. Not everybody in the magical traditions is a trained initiator. So I love talking to other people who have undergone that training and who are actively doing that stuff, particularly in this system. So, and you're a brilliant guy.
Thank you. Very nice of you to say. It is a thing. I mean, the GD tradition makes a big deal out of the difference between Hierophant and 5/6, right? So just because you're entered into Adeptus in 5/6, doesn't mean you'll be a Hierophant. Nick Farrell's pointed out a bunch that, there's someone might have at Fire Raw in New Zealand, he pointed out that someone might have been an adept for 10 or 20 years and then when they become a Hierophant or get the role of Hierophant, have to learn from a brand new adept who's done it or something like that. I don't know. The idea is that just being a Hierophant's a different thing. I know a lot of people see it as an initiation in itself. And I know the first time I did an initiation, my first neophyte sitting on that throne. Well, there's nothing to prepare you for sitting on that throne and the magical effects that take place in and around you when you do, and when you do it right, I think. So, we can talk about that more as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, initiating and running temples is it's something not a lot of people have done, and it is very interesting to talk to other people who have had those experiences. So, I look forward to getting into that with you. But maybe we can also jump back and look a bit about how you got to where you're at as well, since I don't really know much about your origin story and coming of age into magic, and I always find that very, very fun to talk about, of course.
Yeah, it is. It's not everybody likes to do it because, I get that feeling sometimes when I talk to people. It's like, well, I've been on podcasts for 15 years and I've told the story so many times. I'm not saying I have. I just, I can get that I can get the sense from other people. But I mean, one of my favorite things as a podcast host and a podcast, consumer listener, I mean, everybody loves an origin story. It's like, the prologue to what you're seeing. So, I mean, my story is interesting. It's definitely interesting. I had studied since about 2003, 2004. I've got really heavily into comparative religions, and I had always had a strong sense of connection to God. I hated going to church when I was a kid. It was, my father is Greek, but my mother's Italian. So I was raised in the Roman Catholic Church, baptized, communion confirmed. So that's a lot for a kid, a Catholic mass. So I didn't really enjoy being there, but I still felt a really close connection to God. It was very, very intimate, and it was intuitive. So as I kind of carried that faith with me, a friend of mine, Brian Stanford, he used to call it the Gnostic itch. And I truly feel like I had that Gnostic itch at a very young age because I didn't understand the dogma and I didn't care about it. I didn't get the rules, but I knew there was something. So that was the impetus that kind of spurred me on for many, many years to not stop trying to get in contact with this thing that I felt, albeit perhaps quite remotely, at a vast distance, but I still felt it calling. And by a very slow and gradual gravity, I was irresistibly pulled in this direction. I like to think of it as I searched all the drawers, in the filing cabinet of religions, esotericism, spookiness, and some of that was aesthetic, which for its own sake is kind of shallow, but if you get past, if you break through that wall of aesthetic, pure aesthetic of this dark kind of teen angsty thing, you pierce that veil, you enter into the hall, of the of neophytes, and at that point, I was kind of pulled by happenstance. So I was about 19 years old, and my aunt, she had a tenant who was kind of a very quiet lady, a little quirky. She was a school teacher, and she threw herself in front of a train. And my aunt called me up, and she said, "Hey, would you mind coming by and helping me? Bring your buddy. I'm not going to say his name, but bring your friend. He was my best friend at the time, and he and I we got into this stuff together, into the mysteries and comparative religions and esoteric Christianity. But we hadn't really pierced the veil into true esotericism, magic proper." So she called me up, and he and I went down. It turns out the tenant was a hoarder, and she had like stacks of stuff everywhere. She had books and journals from Barnes and Noble still in the cellophane. And so we're loading all this stuff into a truck, and I see a book. It caught my eye, and it's still on my bookshelf today. It was called The Oracle of Kabbalah by Richard Seidman. And the design on it was really cool. It was almost Arabic. I don't know if you would call it, I don't know what you would call the design. Very Hebraic, very Middle Eastern, maybe. And it caught, again, yeah, there you go. I don't know if that's a flagged word or what, so I didn't want to use that. But again, right, the aesthetic drew me to the book. I open it up, and I'm like, this is kind of weird because this belongs to somebody who's now deceased, but can I take this with me? And my aunt said, yeah, absolutely. Because if, whatever doesn't get donated has to go in the garbage. So, or left out at the curb. So I took the book, I read the book. It's very short, in one day, maybe 5 hours walking around my neighborhood. And when I closed the book, I wasn't that much more educated in the basics of Kabbalah, Hebrew letters, tree of life. Wasn't that much more educated than I previously was, but I knew that there was something really special about this. And I reached out. I went on the yellow pages when people actually used the internet yellow pages. And I typed Long Island. That's where I grew up. Long Island Kabbalah group. And an email and a number came up, and I reached out to this guy, and I said, hey, I'm interested in this. And he reached back out to me maybe like a couple hours later, and he said that we don't do that anymore, but there's this other thing. And it ended up being the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And I didn't know what magic was. I was aware of, again, the aesthetic occultism, the aesthetics of esotericism. I loved Tool, and I still do, and all that kind of dark, creepy stuff. They had like a page on their website that was just dedicated to like Berenger Saunier and his nice. Oh, Pussifer's great too, man. I love that. But
yeah.
But so I met with them, and I thought to myself, these people are crazy. They think they're doing magic. Like, what is, like Harry Potter? Like wand waving and all. What is this? So I'm really good at being able to suspend my disbelief if I'm curious. Curiosity spurs me on most of my life's adventures. And so I did meet with them one or two more times, and we set up an initiation. And I was a no call, no show. I just totally bailed on these people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I moved into New York City. I became a bartender, and I was a touring musician. And as luck would have it, or as fate perhaps, my life fell apart after that. About 6 or 7 years after that, completely was destroyed. My best friend that I was telling you about, my spiritual sort of twin flame, uh, died of a heroin overdose on my 30th birthday. And just from there, things spiraled. And I remember reaching out to my contact at the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn Temple, and I was so embarrassed and hat in hand, tail between my legs. But I said, listen, I don't know what or why, but I have to be a part of this. I have to do this. And I was in the Theosophical Society. I didn't shut that stuff out. I continued to investigate it. I practiced the rituals, the lesser and greater rituals of the pentagram, and I was reading about Crowley. I was reading about Westcott. I was reading Don Michael Craig's modern. I got gradually pulled back in, and then finally I decided to make the commitment, right? Because that's what most people in my generation are scared of. We're terrified of commitment, not just to each other, but to anything. And what that entails, right? Because when if you've got like 5 doors in front of you, you have options. But when you choose to walk through a doorway, which is very apropos for the Golden Dawn, when you choose to walk through that doorway, those other doors kind of shut behind you, and this is it. And I underwent my neophyte initiation, and about I want to say 2.25 years later, I got my 5/6, and I moved down to Asheville, North Carolina, a couple of years after that, and I linked up with I had no idea there was a Golden Dawn Temple in Asheville. I reached out to Tabby Cicero, and I said, "Hey, I'm moving to North Carolina, going to Asheville. I know there's a temple there. Where are they?" She said, "Well, you're in luck. They're in Asheville." So I met with the premonstrator of the temple, and we had an interview, and it was great. And I joined the group. It was an incredible group. This was during COVID, so we were meeting on Zoom.
Wow.
And then everybody that had already petitioned and been accepted and vetted, they all of a sudden their neophyte initiation got just drastically. We don't know when it's going to happen, if we're ever going to be able to meet in person. So we called them preophytes. And then, as luck would have it, like 2 years later, we got back together.
Oh my God.
It was great. And I want to say shortly after that, I started really working in the adept grades and into Zelator Adeptus Minor. I received my Hierophant training from somebody who'd been doing it for 12 years. I've been the current Hierophant of this temple for several years now. And that's really it, man. I mean, there's a lot of other side stories, but that's my Golden Dawn trajectory in a nutshell.
Were you a Mason before or after?
No, Masonry was the last quasi-esoteric order I joined, because I don't know, I didn't see the female presence in it, and so I was like, it's got to be unbalanced. I realize now, in the world we're living in today, it's actually extremely healthy for men to get together and just be with each other and learn from elders and learn from people that have that shared experience, and not have to feel the pressures of, just, I don't know, going into Whole Foods and everybody looking at you like you're some sort of, automatically a criminal or something like that. So it's been fantastic. I would say Masonry is one of the best things I've ever done with my life. I would include the Golden Dawn in there. But no, I waited a really, really long time.
Yeah, we had a comment from Occult Perspectives, if you know this fellow. He said, "Worshipful Master was a very magical experience. I can only imagine how beautiful the Hierophant experience would be."
Yeah, well, I've never been, I've never sat in the East in a Masonic lodge, but I will say that I think it's a different kind of work in the Hierophant's chair. I don't think it's any less work, but I think it's just a different kind of work.
Yeah, well, my understanding is the Masonic worshipful master would not be trying to channel spirits.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the thing in Masonry, right? And you let me know if you agree with this or what, but Masonry, everything's highly symbolic in a very mundane way, right? So it's like that kind of basic. There's a lot of Jungian stuff that modern Masons will kind of try and wrap the Masonic thing into and make it psychological, and to a large degree, it is. Whereas when you sit as a Hierophant, you become the mediator between worlds. And I think that the worshipful master's position is emblematic of that, right? It's symbolic of that, being the one who literally brings the light to the candidate, descending from the east, but in the place where the sun rises. But there's a lot more that goes into Hierophant training on a very specific, I would say, astral etheric level. And you are, again, as Frater R.C, as you put it, you're in touch with entities, spirits, whether that be angelic or archangelic or certain, we use, in the Golden Dawn tradition, we use God forms. So you have to create a God form, basically a simulacra of a particular deity with a very specific set of color correspondences. You don't just, it's not, just, ooh, this is nice, I want to be Ma'at today, and I've got a pink feather. It's extremely specific, to the point of being tedious sometimes. And you have to memorize all that and then visualize it and then step into that and empower it, energize it, and wear it as a simulacra. And then you have to project that onto all the officers in what are called the visible stations, where people are actually physically sitting in the room. And then there are the invisible stations, which you're basically recreating the Hall of Ma'at, the weighing of the heart ceremony from the Egyptian Book of the Dead in the Neophyte Temple, using astral sight and moving energy around the room. So yeah, different, very different kind of work. But that's not to take away from the worshipful master position, because I know how much stress and work and blood, sweat, and tears that those worshipful brothers have put in.
Yeah, I have friends doing those roles in some of their lodges these days right now. Still, I don't know much about Masonry, really, as I never got far in it, but I'll try it again pretty soon, I'm sure. Yeah.
You just gotta find the lodge where you fit in, right? It's like GD, right? Every temple has its own culture.
Well, that was the problem. I did first degree in one lodge, and then they didn't call me until this next initiation, and I was like, well, I don't know what, like, there was no teaching between the two. So
yeah.
And since then, they've prevented me from joining any other lodge, and that's what held me up for the last 20 years. They wouldn't let me go somewhere else, and they're like, you have to go there. And I was like, why would I want to continue having experiences with people who mistreated me? Like, it doesn't make any sense, Yeah. And we figured it out now. I finally had drinks with one of the head honchos here in Vancouver, and he knows how it all works. And we sorted it out. The only reason I actually missed my first event was because of the tragedy. So I look forward to enjoying Masonry, because I have so many close friends in town here who are part of some very cool lodges, and there's good stuff going on in them, and they have a good time, and it's great. It's so hard. I think a big part of it is the change in the world these days with post lockdowns and all that. It's become almost impossible to get people to do things, I've noticed. People aren't doing things. Events like in our city, like most live events have shut down. Concert tickets, like just to go to a concert now, to average tickets $300-400. It's very weird, and it's not conducive to sociality. And I think that's actually the most important thing for us humans going forward, is meeting together in real life. And I think once that goes away, we're done. Game over. We're no longer human.
I agree.
if we're
Yeah.
just interfacing with machines.
Yeah, I agree with you 110%. That seems to be the way the push is towards literally, call it what you want. It's anti-humanism by any other name. Just these kind of these multiple divergent these things diverging upon. It seems to be humanity itself. It's a very Gnostic thing. I don't know. Are you a bit of a Gnostic, or is?
I've never liked the Gnosticism that most people spout. Yaldabaoth and the world is evil, and there's these archons that have imprisoned us. I've never believed any of that, or even found it appealing in even the slightest way. The first time I ever found a Gnostic proponent interesting was probably with Sabo Gal's monist Gnosticism, EIO. The camera was blurring it out, but EIO, it's now out in softcover finally. So it's monistic Ophite Gnosticism. So and I think for me the Gnostic truth is the Hermetic one, which I don't know. Like Dr. Litwa told me when I asked him, there is crossover between the early Hermetists and Gnostics. And the proof of that is the Nag Hammadi library, because why would those texts be combined? But otherwise, other than the Nag Hammadi library, there's no evidence that there was any crossover between Christian Gnostic communities, which were definitively Christian, right? They didn't call themselves Gnostics, they called themselves Christians, and the Hermetic communities that were definitively pagan. Yet those texts from both communities appear in the Nag Hammadi, so clearly there was some sort of crossover. Anyway, it's cool to be able to share some of that stuff.
The interesting thing to me, though, so I got a book coming out, shameless self-promotion. It's called A Formless Fire, Rediscovering the Magical Traditions of the West. It's coming out in probably July of this year under Tria Prima. And I basically cover I try and cover as much as I humanly can of the Western Esoteric Traditions, from really, really picking up steam at about the time of the Hellenistic period and the Alexandrian conquest up until the period of the Golden Dawn, fin de siècle occultism in Europe and Rosicrucianism at that point. But in my researches, I would say that I come from a Platonic background, and what you see, right, it's very hard to be able to reconstruct any clear picture of what the edifice or the actual institution, the organizations, whether they were loose or whether they were specific, and if where they met had any crossovers, if their membership had any crossover. It's very difficult to be able to tell a lot of that stuff. But what is present in the text, and I will say this beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that they are all using a unified vernacular referring to discrete, specific concepts. So what they exhibit in the writings, whether that's Hermetic, Neoplatonic, as to your point, the variation of early Christianities that we refer to as Gnostic, but also broader throughout the broader early Christian community itself, is a like sort of early, like a proto-scientific vernacular. It's really a spiritual vernacular. And what they're constantly trying to address is the existential dilemma of the spirit and its embodiment. And you see that throughout. And there are techniques of ascent and techniques of essentially, rising into the noetic realm and having a sort of trans-rational experience, but they're all using the very, very highly specific. They're not just using Greek as a lingua franca. They're using these specific words. Nous is a great one. Psyche, to refer to the soul. Very, very clear delineated concepts, and that's uniform throughout them. And to me, that's mind-blowing, because it suggests actually that the whole, I guess, flowering force forth of the Christ event seems to be the soteriological solution to the existential dilemma that they were all positing. Now, that's whether or not you're sort of a literalist and you believe that Christ actually incarnated and etc., or if you just think it's purely symbolic. Either way, it solves the dilemma of, the ontological existential dilemma through this specific soteriology that agrees with Platonism, Neoplatonism, and Hermetism at that time. So that to me is kind of mind blowing. I see a lot of, it's kind of like, yeah, you and I practice magic in the Golden Dawn tradition. There might be some other people over there doing something else, but the telos of at least what I would say the initiatic magical community is theurgic. It's about spiritual elevation, and they had very, very similar reports. I mean, look at the Pymander talking about in the first zone you give up this and that. In the second zone you give up another thing. They're talking about the soul stripping away the vices and virtues and the powers that it took on in its physical incarnation. Well, you go back to Porphyry. I think the tract is On What Is Up to Us, and he's talking about the soul's descent into materiality, and at each planet it stops and puts on a vice and a virtue. He calls these the accretions or astral garments, and that results in fate, the person. This is the essence. It's not, they didn't use it for divination astrology. They used it as a map of fate and a map of right, because as Heraclitus says, ethos anthropos daimon, character is fate. And so there's such insane, they're using the same language, not only phonetically, but there's a system here. It's a very, very clear system. And the thing that I find really tricky is that when you talk to academics about this stuff, they have such a granular, hyper nuanced approach, because that's the the academy it requires that. It demands that of you, that they kind of get lost and can't see the forest for the trees when there's such a clear 1-to-1, and it's so rare that you get a 1-to-1 correspondence there, but there's so many of them throughout the corpus of, again, Platonic, Neoplatonic, and Hermetic literature of that time.
Yeah, that's something actually I've never really thought about in that kind of a pinpointed sort of way. Just the usefulness of the terminology of late Platonism and other associated streams of thought like Hermeticism and all the other texts we find from the pseudepigrapha and the Nag Hammadi and exiled writings, Chaldean oracles, all these things that were discarded or marginalized by the political dominance of the new Christian empire when it was adopted as a control mechanism to maintain control. And it's remarkable how well they did that. It's still alive today. Right? It has its own country. How many churches have their own country?
I think it has its own army too, right? The Swiss Guard or something.
The Swiss Guard. I mean, but hey, they have made it good improvements. They recently raised the age of consent for boys to over, so you have to be like over 12 now.
Oh, yes.
It was 12 for a long time in Vatican City. Yeah, we had to go there.
I'm glad you did. Yeah, that was the one thing, again, being raised Roman Catholic, and
I'm an ex-Catholic too, more or less, so that we have that in common. And even though I converted to it from yoga.
Yeah, I'm not one to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that people who do that are a little simple-minded. But I will say the thing that pissed me off, that literally made me like sick to my stomach, was I visited the Vatican in 2018, and I walked in, right, and Pope Francis, he doesn't live in the main part. He lives in like a little, it looks like I don't know, an apartment building off to the right. You know, he doesn't live in the main suite anymore, but you walk in there and just there's Latin words written in gold leaf, you know, like 30 feet high by like 20 feet long. It's like I could scratch a little bit of that with my pinky nail and probably feed like a family for a couple of months or something. It's like, we're talking about apostolic poverty and all stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's like the church has so much wealth that I think it could contribute quite more liberally in terms of real world financial, stuff. And, I kind of was like, okay, but I'm not one to say Christianity itself is garbage, because this is what people do, right? To your point earlier, it's like once you get picked up by something like Rome, right? The modern day equivalent. I mean, you become Coca-Cola, you get state sponsorship, they give you blank checks. I don't care who's listening to this. You could have the best intentions. If you're the guy getting those checks, you're probably not going to end up very dissimilarly to the people who abuse power time and again, over and over in every single human institution that comes into existence, because people make the institutions, right? And everything people make will be indelibly marked with our highest potentialities and our lowest lows, right? So I went back to Christianity even earlier than 2018, but really I found my footing in a kind of a return to Christianity. I would call what I do, I wouldn't call myself a Gnostic, because like not even Gnostics called themselves Gnostics, but I would say that
right.
I definitely adhere more to Basilidian and Valentinian Gnosticism, which is kind of knows that it's talking about itself poetically, analogically, in a lot of ways. And also the demiurge is not explicitly, or I would say exclusively, malevolent. It's not, that's not the part it plays. That's more Sethian Gnosticism, where you're talking about the archons, raping Eve and things like that. It's not really the case in Valentinian Gnosticism. And there's
We
just
actually have a
something.
comment about that.
Yeah.
Can I read it?
Let's see.
Jorge
Yeah.
Quinones, our brother Jorge Quinones over in Salt Lake. Once I got deep into the Rosicrucianisms of the GD, it was hard for me not to see the parallelism with Valentinian Gnosticism.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that's it's on point. Oh, we had another comment from a occult perspective, so we'll do it. I see the archangels Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel as possibly being representative of the three main officers
in a Masonic lodge.
Cool. I'm not sure if he means a Masonic lodge or a Golden Dawn lodge. Either way, cool. Either way.
Yeah.
What? How did your magical journey from affect your Roman Catholicism as you went along? Like, did you just break with Roman Catholic approaches to your life and faith, and then reconstruct a new relationship with Christian faith?
Well,
or did you morph it? Was it more of a morphing or a break?
I would say I went through a period in my teens, like most people do, where I joined the other team. I don't know if I really thought I was atheist. I don't think there was been a point in my life where I was sincerely atheist. I've always known that there was something else. But it's like any other teenager. Mark Stavish has called it therapeutic blasphemy. And I went through that phase, listening to like Led Zeppelin and, Black Sabbath, and getting into Crowley and Boleskine and all that stuff. And it was fun, but I didn't find any real substance there. And so I kind of moved on to Eastern stuff, right? Because that's what was available in what essentially the spiritual market in the 80s became commercial. Really in the 70s when it started mixing with music, but it became completely commercialized in what is available to like this kid who grew up in the suburbs. I didn't have any family members that were Masons. I didn't know anybody that was like doing, going to some sort of Gnostic church or was in a coven or anything like that. So what was available was, yoga and stuff like that, and Buddhism, which is Western Buddhism is awful. It's like a complete corruption and perversion of the actual teachings. When you go back and you even look further into the Vedic origins of a lot of, that stuff, and the Pali, the original Pali canons that inform that sort of metaphysics or theology or whatever you want to call it. But we destroyed that and basically turned it into, I don't know, Lululemon. I have no idea. But I started getting into that stuff, and it introduced me to meditation, which was amazing, incredible. So I've been meditating since I was about 16. And it got me into sort of being able to think abstractly, which I kind of already was able to do by reading Plato. But the Western mind was not ready to think in the spiritual terms where we are today. 20 years ago, we could not think in abstractions. We weren't good at doing that. And the Eastern vernacular and the Eastern concepts of, no mind and no self, even though that's bullshit, no self, or sorry, BS. It's
no, we can swear. You just can't swear in the first 15 minutes on YouTube or the first
Okay.
half hour. After that,
yeah. For anybody that's like seen me on my own, podcasts like Etherica and stuff like that, I they call it the New York comma. I just say the F word every like too often. Right. But I got into that stuff, and I realized that a lot of it I was disappointed with a lot of the people and the mentors and things. And part of that was me putting them on a pedestal, but also part of that was they were not walking the walk. They were talking the talk, but they couldn't walk it. So really, I guess I abandoned my Roman Catholicism somewhere around the age of 13 or 12, and kind of got into the whole rock and roll thing, which inevitably leads you to some form of Satanism. It's just whether or not do you want to participate in this? And like, no, I just like the music, and I kind of just, I went into the aesthetic thing, I would call it like hot topic interest in like in Satanism. Like I have a t-shirt that says "God's busy, can I help you?" That's like that's about as far as I went. It was that very angsty sort of BS phase, and I guess that's when it happened. But I ended up fully coming back to Christianity. In the Golden Dawn brought me back to Christianity because it began to explicate and elaborate the Western traditions. And I began to have a burgeoning context for what this is, what esotericism is, what we mean when we talk about Christ, what we mean when we talk about, theology and metaphysics, and defining it on its own terms historically, rather than having to say, well, I like Buddhism better because it doesn't tell me to like, eat somebody in cracker form and drink their blood. It's like, I feel like that's like a very 12-year-old excuse, no, well, there's also this thing, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called alchemy, there's this thing where it's like, it's supposed to be an alchemical high ritual that actually came from other things, even you look back as far as the coffin texts or the pyramid texts, and there's that whole thing, the theophagy, the eating of the god, so I didn't know that when I was a kid, that like there's this rich, beautiful spiritual tradition in the West, and the Golden Dawn taught me that and recontextualized Christianity. And so I went back to it, and I started going back to church. I started getting back into, just going to mass. I don't get caught up in these labels that everybody, we live in an age now where people are hyper obsessed with identity. It's like all the accoutrement and the accessories of my lifestyle have to define me. I don't care about any of that stuff. I truly, I couldn't care less. it's about I need to have an experience of the transcendent. I want to have an experience with my God. And so whatever I can do that brings me that closeness, the rest is like, I don't know. It's like rearranging garbage, like, okay, I put the week old pizza on that shelf now. It's like, no, it's still bullshit. Like, so I wasn't too caught up in what form of Christianity I was practicing. I just went back to the basics. I started going back to mass and receiving the Eucharist. And then from there, it kind of just took off. I began having very, very visceral experiences. I received a diaconate office in the temple, the old Templar Church via the CBCS. And I was a deacon for 7 years. I incarnated with the ACGRC, the Apostolic Church of the Golden Rosy Cross. I took my ordination. I became a priest in that order. I serve mass now regularly. Full consecration of the Eucharist. I've since done marriages and baptisms and things like that. And so that's
wow.
That's my thing.
No,
and yeah, that's my thing. That's the way I enter. I serve.
We have a lot more in common than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to.
And I already thought we had a lot in common, and now you just like dump all this on me. Like, okay, well, we need to go. We're finish, and then I'm gonna wind back to the beginning of what you said, and we'll go through each point and unpack it because I have so many questions.
I remember that my presiding priest, who's now my bishop, he taught me. He told me traditionally it's the deacon's privilege to deliver the homily. So I spent years delivering homilies, and when he couldn't attend, he would pre-consecrate the Eucharist and then give it to me. And then the first time I administered communion, I cried. I mean, I felt like I'm home. This is the itch that I've been trying to scratch my entire life. And it was like that moment where the clouds part and it's just, and it just felt like the square peg finally found a square hole. And so from there, I received, a lot of training by somebody, again, who had been doing it for decades. And it's really a beautiful thing. And that's really, I bring my Christianity out into the world, out into my life. I read the Bible, I read the Apocrypha, I read the Gnostic texts, I read Neoplatonic canons, Hermetic canons. I read everything, but I really only need the 4 canonical gospels. That's all I really need. I have found once you understand this stuff, you understand it. Like, you stop looking for, you've got what you need in front of you, but you don't like it. You want something exotic, but it's you're not able to understand this shit yet. So you're trying to find it over here, over there. You have to make yourself ready for it. You don't find something and make it conform to you. Otherwise, what's the point? You're not doing anything spiritual. You have to grow. You have to ascend. And so you have to strive. He who will not strive will not attain. Right? And so, it's rather than trying to find something that makes sense to me. Why should it make sense to you? If you're trying to improve and get better and become more spiritual and broaden your consciousness, it shouldn't make sense to you, right? So you have to get there, and that takes time, and it takes dedication in the form of making a statement to the universe. Like, I feel like God wants you to make the first move, and then He'll meet you. So it's like you have to do something more than just. It's a dedication of sincerity to this thing that provides grace, really.
Yeah, that's very well said. So much in all that. Amazing. Yeah, I have a very, very sacramental theology as well, and I wouldn't. Though I might be a bigger fan of Paul than the Gospels, which is like the least popular thing to say these days.
I love Paul.
Though I would have to, and it's tricky to say that because people have such a poor understanding of Pauline theology. Just the simple fact alone that, like, every professor I've had in this field has pretty much confirmed, well, I know there's some counter opinions to this, but the Pauline epistles weren't all written by Paul.
Right.
They weren't all written by, there's the genuine ones and the contested ones.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, for a good example of why I like Paul so much, actually, people can check out Dr. Justin Sledge's video on Paul's Merkava and Hecalot practices, in which he says or argues that Paul was practicing Merkava and Hecalot, these mystical practices, and met Jesus in those states. In which case, so Jesus came to Paul in these by practicing proto-Kabbalistic mysticism, and that the significance of that and how it defined who Paul became. He was Saul and became Paul, right? So it was this radical encounter with the other, right? An encounter in which his symbolic reality as Saul of Tarsus was shattered. Absolutely, he was destroyed. It was a traumatic encounter with the real, and he had to reconfigure himself based on that mystical experience, and he became Paul. And for me, that is the central Christian message, that you can become more like God through encounter with the real. And for a Christian, the real is Christos,
right?
And all of reality. Yeah. If you were a pagan Neoplatonist, that would be the nous. If you were a Hermeticist, that would be the light. Right. Or a Hermetist, an ancient Hermetist, a pagan Hermetist, that would be light, just pure light. And so, yeah, the Gospels are fun too, of course, especially the more it's history and it's interpretation theory in action and the hermeneutics of all of it. Like, we all love the Gospel of John, but it's also like the most anti-Jewish one, It has like, I came to set mother against daughter and son against father and bring a sword.
Yeah, well, that's actually I think that's Matthew. That might be, I think, Matthew 35. But he says, "Think not that I come to bring peace. I don't come to bring peace. I come to bring a sword." And that's another amazing thing that I love about the Gospels is that, if you want to think about it Kabbalistically, Christ embodied. He wasn't this. We don't call him the Lamb because he was peaceful. We call him the Lamb because he served as a sacrifice. But we didn't call him the Lamb because he's peaceful. He literally says multiple times, I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring essentially war. He says, I come to bring a sword. And it's even exemplified in when he overturns, he actually flogs the money changers in the court of the temple, so it's people try and defang and declaw Christ. And really, there's a lot of fire there, but what he rails against is hypocrisy, and I think that's showing us justice, and that kind of thing. But don't get me wrong. I love Paul. That's actually my confirmation name is Paul. But
mine's Ignatius.
I found out that Ephesians is one of the contested epistles, and that's like my favorite one.
Like when you think about the contested epistles or the authentic ones, the idea is it's not that they were people trying to overturn Pauline theology. They were people stuck, still alive, with Paul dead, and the end of the world hadn't come. Christ hadn't returned. The reason Paul was saying, it's if you're a virgin, stay a virgin, right? Just focus on God because the end is nigh. And so, it made no sense for you to go get married and start a family if like the mountain is coming down soon. Right. But then Paul died and the church was like, oh shit, we can't keep putting our servants at the head of our table and the master at the foot of the table and still have a functional society in that kind of way. So, the beautiful social flipping of hierarchies on its head that we find in Corinthians is completely reversed by Colossians, where it's like, the man is the head of the household, like Christ is the head of the church, yada, yada, yada. But they needed to find some sort of way to continue on. So Ephesians, lots of great stuff in Ephesians and good stuff in a lot of the uncontested epistles. But Yeah, it's interesting because it's the church trying to figure itself out after things didn't go as planned, which to me is infinitely and unendingly fascinating.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
it took, and the idea too that I find is this modern fallacy of like the Council of Nicaea essentially establishing, the books of the Bible, the 66 books of the Bible. That's total bunk too. It took a very long period of time. And there's this, people don't understand. See, that's the whole thing. Like once I started understanding and learning about the history of the stuff and the context, I was like, oh, so I ran from one pack of lies directly to another. I touted it as enlightenment. Oh, it's all bullshit. Nothing's real. They lied to us. It's just another lie. So you got to go back and if you care, about truth, you got to go back and take a look at it. And yeah, there were early Christianities, early Christian communities. A lot of them didn't even agree on the nature of Christ being either, fully man or fully God, or if it was just symbolic or what. But these things happen. We have the benefit now of being able to look back over 2,000 years and just kind of make little bullet points of history and then pat ourselves on the head for look how smart we are. When it's really like it's not fathomable to a human mind how much change takes place. And and it's the same thing with anything else. You never hear about the good stuff. You only hear about the bad stuff. It's the same people. That's just people are obsessed with that kind of stuff. But a lot of change and a lot of growth, and at times a lot of de-evolution, a lot of expansion. But truly, I would say at the point where we're at now, and like post Vatican II, very unhappy with Roman Catholicism as just an organization. So I would say that I I don't know. I hesitate to say I'm not Catholic, because I still have my baptism. I still have my communion, my confirmation. I still feel totally fine. I feel great going to a, yeah.
I
So
may not be
I don't know.
Catholic anymore, but I still feel great. What's that about? I still feel okay.
Yeah.
Surely the blight and the smiting is coming soon.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Guilt.
no, you just might not be Roman Catholic anymore. I mean,
Right.
Catholic, like even the World Council of Churches considers Anglicans, Episcopalians, and Lutherans to be Catholic. Why do they consider Lutherans, who started the Evangelische movement and Reformation, considered Catholics by the World Council of Churches? Because they recognize the first 7 ecclesiastical councils. So what's small c Catholic is Catholic theology, and recognizes those first 7 councils. I'm not sure if I recognize those councils anymore. The whole early Christianity didn't care a whit, as far as I can tell, for whether Jesus was God or was like God, homoousios or homoiousios, and all the stuff with the hypostasis and all of it came on hundreds of years later. The early Christians didn't really seem too concerned about that so much. I mean, in the early days, there was a church of the hermaphroditical Jesus. They had all kinds of different Christian churches, right there, probably sitting next to the Temple of Mercury, with the triphallus Mercury with the penis nose and forehead and chin. Like all of these people were hanging out together and doing their worship, often in a very integrated way due to just economic factors, right?
Yeah.
Like who's got the worship at 2, and then we'll go to the Bacchus at 4, and then we can go hit up the I don't know. It would have been an interesting time to be alive, but so is today. I mean, the apocalypticism you referred to in the early church, and its a disappointing result in the fact that it didn't happen, is very parallel to modern times, and perhaps every time, because you start controlling the world, and we're interpreting the world in a way that you think it's like, we see this. People think everything's going to end. We're being told everything's going to end, so no one's living in a way that makes any sense. We're just consuming and destroying, and it's insanity. It is satanic. for sure.
That's a great point.
In the sense of it's the absence of God, it's the absence of any value of nature or humanity whatsoever. And valuing one over the other is a mistake because they're the same thing, right? You know, if you want to get rid of humans and save nature, well, you've destroyed nature. If you want to destroy nature, well, you destroy humans. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, you know, to bring it back to the Golden Dawn, is just like you see a lot of people interested in the Golden Dawn or getting involved in Golden Dawn offshoots and stuff, and there's a strong sort of anti-Christian bias there. And the thing is, like, the people who founded the Golden Dawn were devout Christians, like through and through. And, you know, obviously they weren't, you know, I don't know, some of them were probably, you know, Catholic or you know, definitely Anglican. But the thing is, a lot of those people go through the outer order, they don't get to the inner order. They never take the 5-6 ritual, you know, or like the really haughty ones that go through the outer order and think they know what it's about. And they get to the inner order and they're like, what the hell is this? You know, it's like, it's, you know, there's no secret there. It's Rosicrucian, right? So it's a Rosicrucian.
It was this, I didn't know because I never
Neither
read
did
ahead. I had no idea when I found that out. I was blown away. I was like, what the hell?
Same.
I
had no clue too, because at the time there just wasn't all this wealth of information that was readily available. And yeah, you know, the first thing that I was told was don't read your rituals. Don't read ahead. So I never did, because, you know, I'm one of the few people that got involved with the Golden Dawn having no idea what it was. So when you know, there's a point where, I'm not going to go too far, but when you just kind of turn and you're like, oh shit. And it really, it floored me. It made I get I get a visceral physical feeling just thinking about that 5-6 experience. Definitely, you know, I've taken a lot of initiations, hands down my favorite, hands down. But yeah, you cannot extract Christianity from the Golden Dawn. You can't.
It's all in there. I mean, at the same time, the 5-6 initiation is I mean, you know, if many Christians looked at it, they would not consider it the least bit Christian. They would be like, this is some demonic Egyptian pagan distortion of the Christian message. So yeah, right. And that's why that's one thing I like, that the Golden Dawn is not a religion like like some other orders are, or are more like that. Yeah, it makes sense that you can be any religion, just like the original Rosicrucian Manifesto's state. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that's great, and it's one of the strengths of the tradition. Absolutely. And I had a conversion experience in Portal and became a Christian, and that was a personal thing. But if I had stayed a practicing Celtic Druid neo-pagan, no one would have cared. No one would have cared, because it doesn't impact the ritual that you're doing, right? You know, it doesn't impact the Golden Dawn work. We have a comment on the Golden Dawn, occult perspectives. Thanks again for watching, brother. Thanks for everyone watching, and please give us comments and likes, like the video, thumbs it up or thumb something. I don't know. Yeah, Golden Dawn definitely seems like a much more advanced version, since it incorporates actual magical practices. Now, I wouldn't say it's a more advanced version than Masonry, but it is Masonry with its, you know, Masonry and with magic is a very reductive way to say it. You know, Westcott and Mathers wanted to add two things to not really Masonry. They wanted to add it more to the SRIA, right? Which comes out of the OGR and not Masonry, though the two, of course, are intimately interlinked in many ways.
It was all Masons.
They were Master Masons and they're SRIA, right? They wanted to create a Rosicrucian order with Masonic elements, but mainly they wanted to incorporate practical magic, practical Kabbalah, and women. They wanted to allow women, and that was it. Like, to me, that just makes perfect sense. And, you know, I find it so hilarious that people treat the Golden Dawn like it's some archaic, patriarchal, Victorian structure. It's like, no, motherfuckers. It is an avant-garde, progressive organization that not only deviated from Masonry and the SRIA, which was Rosicrucianism, and still is, and to insert practical magic, grimoire magic, and advance it into new levels, like taking ideas that had existed in Scott's discovery of witchcraft and Dee's Enochiana that had been developed through Enochian magicians way before the Golden Dawn, right? Golden Dawn Enochian, as I like to remind people, doesn't come from the Golden Dawn. It comes from the cipher manuscripts and from the practical angel magic texts Skinner published that has all these strange developments that are post John Dee. They happened after John Dee with the separation of the tablets, the Tablet of Union. The Golden Dawn did not create the Tablet of Union. Let's put it that way. A lot of people are probably going, what? How can that be? Yeah. They just developed these things in a very progressive and structured, methodological, structuralist approach, and brought women in on equal footing. And it's just created this wonderful thing. And I never wanted to join the Golden Dawn. I just wanted to learn magic and was tired of being stuck with my two buddies in my high school Wiccan coven, which was me, which was basically me who was interested in occultism and two guys who wanted to see if magic could get them laid. That was essentially what that was. But it became something very cool, actually, right? It became something very cool. One of those guys still runs a GD temple in North Vancouver, which with many of my stolen instruments and properties. Here's a message from Jorge Quinones. Thanks again for watching, guys. I like Mr. Baker because Paul just wants to domesticate the community. That suffers from a lack of a comma. Like Mr. Baker. I don't know, because Paul just wants to domesticate the community. Christ is the voice of revolution and power. All right. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, the power that Christ embodies is the power that is admonished throughout the initiatic theurgic traditions of the West, which is power in powerlessness. It's essentially the idea that you have to give up the things that you think you know, that you think you understand, that your persona wants or is offended by, because these are all attachments that will continually pull you towards some kind of very worldly circumstance. You're just, you know, Plato puts it really good. It's either in I forget if it's in the Phaedo or the Phaedrus. I get those two mixed up. I've read them both separately many times, but the names are just too similar. But he basically says, Socrates says in one of the dialogues, he says, listen, you know, and it would be very popular today, right? It would be some kind of meme that somebody posts, some sort of inspirational card, you know, like it's that whole thing, this too shall pass, you know, you don't be upset at the things in life that make you sad or bring you grief because they're ultimately not real. But then Socrates goes on to say, don't be happy about anything in life. Don't become overcome with joy because you're still in thrall to the illusion. That's not real either. And I think, you know, we're kind of more, I guess nowadays people would call it toxic positivity, where it's like, oh, we only want to focus on the good. And it's like, you have to understand something. It's called spiritual because it's, you know, it's something, it's inclusive of materiality, but it's also something completely separate. You know, and I think a lot of people want to stuff spirituality into this kind of, you know, really shiny, like life positivity. When at the end of the day, you know, a lot of all of the theurgic traditions of the past, of which Christianity truly is the successor, and I would say is in my opinion, it is the ultimate expression of, right? It is the newest dispensation of, is that in order to have a trans-rational experience of any, you know, renovating capacity, you have to give up the wisdom of the world. You have to give up the worldly way. Now, that's not to say you go into the woods and live like an ascetic. It just means that you have to reorient your thinking and approach spirit in a way that divests the self. You're no longer the locus of, you're not the most important thing in the world. Like it's not really about you, and when you can truly understand that and then embody that, that is the beginning of what we might say the ascent toward the Gnostic experience. Now, the thing is, like, you don't dissolve and turn into, like, dust in the stratosphere. No, you come back to daily living and chop wood and carry water, but hopefully you're seeing everything, all the mundane things that surrounded you your whole life, as if for the first time, with a complete renovation of the self. And that stuff will encroach back in. The persona will, it's not a one and done deal. In alchemy, there are many circulations. It has to be done over and over. And I would say that is also a very Golden Dawn perspective. I would say now, Annie, as early as like the flying rolls, that we have it from Annie Horniman, right? Fortitude at Recti. She wrote something that basically says, look, there, and even Westcott says this, there is no higher authority in the Golden Dawn than the ritual itself. Everything else is just kind of commentary, and it's for us to sort of live out in our own lives. But if you go to the ritual and you look at the trajectory and you really analyze what's happening through the several outer order degrees and then on into the 5-6, you see that it is this kind of divestiture and renovation via the solve et coagula, an alchemical formula of taking apart and then recombining, which is just another expression for what I just said. So I think, yeah, that's the kind of power we're talking about. Not worldly power, but a spiritual power that you bring into the world by giving up yourself, at least, and for me, since I kind of made the cosmic apology, so to speak, I was wrong. I don't know what I'm doing. Please take over. Since that has happened, I've never stepped back in the driver's seat. Everything is being, I'm under guidance completely. So that doesn't mean I don't have my days where I throw a tantrum or, but still, there's really, once at a certain point of contact with what we call the higher and divine genius, there is no, you don't get that steering wheel back.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you've got to find your life, you have to lose it, right? We have the idea of building your life on God and not anything else, not an identity or an ideology or materiality. It is funny, isn't it? You mentioned the focus on identity, and as far as I can tell, and I've talked to some psychologists, of course, on this podcast, and I'd like to dig in deeper into this one day with one of them, but as far as I can tell, there's different psychological traditions: Freud, Jung, Reich, Adler, Klein, all these people. But as far as I can tell, they all agree on at least one thing, which is that identifying with an object or identity, focusing, identifying with an identity or an object is causes, schizoid fracturing of your psyche. Like, mm-hmm. As far as I can tell, and yet we've somehow become a society that only cares about that, and it's really wild to see that, and yet at the same time is celebrating a sort of eternal psychology. Eternal therapy is a very popular thing. Getting us into eternal talk therapy for some people. Hard for me to imagine that, but I'm sure those people are out there who are stuck needing that constant dialogue with a therapist for whatever reason, or whether it's or pharmaceuticals, getting us permanently on pharmaceuticals, right? Like, I take care of a diabetic mother who's been fighting cancer for years and has constant major surgeries, and everything the diabetes organization says about diabetes health is a lie. Like, it's all a lie, because they're all sponsored by the companies that create diabetes. That's who they're sponsored by, stevia and shit like that. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, we've become a very sick culture in society, and it's sad. Though I go back and forth on whether I not think religion can save us, and by religion I mean spirituality. I do see them as exactly the same thing.
Right.
Though as words they can be used in different ways, but I don't see them as being different things. And you know, the more you look at how people are treating magic these days, the more I see how people are treating magic and bringing magic into their lives and developing magical practices, the less it seems distinct from a religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
That's a good point.
it's filling the same role that religion used to fill. So
Yeah.
how is it different? And I do love Stephen Skinner's distinction between magic, religion, and mystery schools.
Yeah.
A wonderful distinction, very helpful and useful. But today, yeah, I don't think people are aware of those distinctions and therefore can't apply them. And nor do they need to. We have a quick comment from Jorge that you'll like. I have been an officer in Freemasonry and the GD. To me, the GD is light years from Masonic rituals and meaning. I used to think that after my first Masonic initiation in 2004, but now I think it's just different. It's just different, and you can't compare the two.
Yeah.
You know? But I think it was unfair when I used to see it that way. But obviously we know what he means by that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. If you're looking at it from the perspective of a trained, magician, a magician is essentially, I would say that one of the defining characteristics of a magician is active psychism rather than passive mediumism. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of active psychism, then yeah, I mean, there's probably very little conscious active psychism in a Masonic ritual, but they serve two very different purposes. I think practically. I don't necessarily think I can't say that I feel one way or the other about was Masonry meant to be like the Golden Dawn is? Maybe. I don't know. I have no idea. I can't comment, but I will say practically they serve very different purposes and similar and complementary, but as institutions, they serve very different purposes. But the thing is, Golden Dawn, and I've said this before, but Golden Dawn temples, we don't have. I mean, if your temple does, if your order does, fantastic. That's fantastic. But like most people and groups of people that practice magic, I have found in my experience, they don't have the, institution behind them to buy a building and to have a temple board and to, put on fundraisers and large scale charities and blood drives all the time and donate tens of thousands of dollars a year to children's hospitals and, veterans hospitals and homes for the elderly the way Masonry does. And so one of the consequences of having that sort of edifice behind you and that organization is that you usually get Masonic rituals done in a really beautiful setting, like a breathtaking, immersive setting. And that's not the case for everybody. I mean, there's plenty of country lodges out here where they're meeting in some sort of, in a VA hall right now. And that's fine too. I'm sure they've got their temple furniture and all that stuff. But by and large, I mean, Masonry, you are able to have an incredible, almost like movie-like experience. Whereas, I mean, like, I've only done Golden Dawn in like rented spaces and living rooms and basements and stuff like that. So, the thing is, the astral etheric work of the Hierophant and of the people, the adepts sitting on the dais helping with that work, it does transform, the actual container. It extends the container and it shapes it astrally so that you should be actually sitting in an attenuated version of the Hall of Mott at the weighing of the heart ceremony when you do the neophyte. So that's really cool. But still, we don't, oh, unless you're renting from a Masonic hall, you don't, which is becoming increasingly difficult. You don't really have the physical setting that is as grandiose and it doesn't transport you necessarily the same way. So again, part of that is, I'm sure, some sort of cosmic lesson for Golden Dawn magicians to cultivate their imagination. So but I don't know, what do you think about it? You haven't really had extensive experience in Masonry, but how has your view changed?
All I've done is in 20 years ago, 2004, I went to my first degree in Masonry. It was a very upsetting experience, and things were not the way they said they would be. And afterwards, my friends who were top Masons in the province heard about it. They were like, "Oh yeah, they should have sent you to an Irish lodge," is what they said. I was in the process of literally going back to Ireland after that, and using my getting my citizenship and all that, and spending the rest of my life there, and because I've been accepted into my PhD over at Exeter, and Wales Lampeter at the time. Then Nicholas Goodwin Clark moved to Exeter, and so I was very much in my I was 5 years later I was having drinks with Jerry Adams in Belfast, and I did that many times. So like toasting the Queen of England was strange for me. It was strange to say the least. But I was young then. I was 23, and now I'm older. Now I'm 43, and so it's like I'm different. I've learned different things. I've had more experiences and more friendships, and I've met Masons all over the world, because I didn't know you weren't allowed to like wear the symbols unless you were third degree. So I didn't. So I would wear the symbols sometimes. I'd have a hat. Someone would give me a hat, and I'd wear, because I didn't know the rules, because they initiated it and never told me anything. But now I've sorted all that out, and I'm going to actually do it properly. We have a comment from a Mason here, David Young. Thank you, David, for commenting. He says, Masonic ritual can be approached with a deep theurgic intent. It depends on the egregore of the lodge and the mindfulness of the brethren. I love that. It instantly makes me think of just the practice of the power of the practice of theoria all by itself, just contemplative spirituality, discursive spirituality, which is very deep in the Western canon and of practices, right? Yeah, of course. It's I would say Masonry is, if the Golden Dawn is magical, Masonry is mystical, because you're still meant to have an experience, and the sacred geometry alone, if you know what's going on and how to engage with sacred geometry, because most people don't understand how to engage with it. Right. And that's very much through visualization and imagination, right? Yeah. Or what's the Greek word for that? So anyway, so it maybe because it's not magical in the sense that you're trying to evoke spirits and compel them to do things to the candidate, like we do when we open Enochian tablets, and initiate the person's name into them, and call all the mighty archangels, angels, rulers, kings, and elementals to enact this element on this person, which is kind of nuts, but hey, it's how it works.
I've made I just recently posted something, Washington Alexandria Lodge, number 22 here in the States. They host something called an Esoteric Corner, and I a couple of months ago actually, but they just posted it on YouTube, and I did a whole presentation on Renaissance theurgy and Freemasonry. I've made some pretty strong points, or at least some interesting parallels between actual theurgy and Freemasonry, because Freemasonry is, it is, to me, it is the due custodian of the symbol systems of Western esoteric traditions. But a lot of lodges, unfortunately, treat it like it's like the old granddad who has an original Picasso in the attic and has no idea. It's like, oh yeah, that old thing. So but
the more bad things I do, the prettier he gets.
Yeah, good one. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 3 degrees have a direct correlation, really, to the partitions of the ladder of the virtues in Iamblichi and Theurgy, and a lot of, even if you look at, and again, for anybody that's listening to this, it's not a Mason, things are different in different jurisdictions. So it's not all Masonic ritual is is exactly the same everywhere. In fact, it differs dramatically from even just local jurisdictions here in the States, from state to state. I mean, like Pennsylvania is like the, you know, the redhead stepchild of United States Masonry. It's like completely different from what everybody's doing. But I would say
I
that,
just
yeah, go ahead.
No, it's all right. I just literally shared a video posted by this kid, historian kid, Aiden Mattis in the States. He has the Lore Lodge, which is really cool. And he did a whole video explaining all that about Freemasonry and how like disconnected and disorganized it all is. So don't worry, like we don't run the world, which is, you know, it's more believable than the OTO running the world, which is my favorite thing, all the conspiracy stuff. Then they're like, and the secret rulers of the world are the OTO. It's like, tell them that.
That's funny.
He pointed out how different and disconnected the different traditions and grand lodges and all that stuff are. Like the lodge I'm joining now and starting over with is an Australian craft lodge, and apparently so I have no idea what that means, but it's going to be interesting. Rodney McGillivray says, I'd add that Freemasonry can be viewed through an alchemical lens similar to the Golden Dawn. Exactly, because it contains the corpus of Western mystical and symbolic thinking, right, which we see again. It's so interesting in D's Monis Hieroglyphica, which everyone can see on the screen in between us here in the middle of the Golden Dawn water and fire hexagram. That Monis represents these alchemical stages of development that D read the year earlier in Zosimos. So D read Zosimos. The next year he wrote the Monis Hieroglyphica. So there we go. We got these two progressions of theurgic spiritual development drawn across history in this very interesting and fascinating connection between those two men. And Masonry, the relationship between D, of course, and Masonry and Rosicrucianism is fascinating because it's oblique but distinct but obvious, right?
Well, yeah, because I mean, all of those, especially Rosicrucian Freemasonry, you know, because they would have been very familiar with D at the time for several reasons. But he wrote the mathematical preface to Euclid's Elements, which was, you know, I mean, we have minute books from Scottish lodges in the 1600s talking about how, we discussed this mathematical preface that John Dee wrote, or in Scotland or England, I can't remember, but we have these. They were actually actively discussing these things, and you do see it, particularly in the North Carolina jurisdiction, which is the only one that I can speak to. When you take the 3 degrees, I recently participated in an education piece from my own lodge, and I pointed out to the brethren that at each of your 3 obligations. And I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but for those who know, think on it. Each of your obligations is associated with a particular element: water, air, and fire. And so then the question that I got afterwards, well, where does earth fit in? Well, it's you. You're the material being worked on. You are the negrito. You are the calcination that has to take place at first of the prima materia, and you have to burn that dross off. And these things all, I mean, you can even see it right in the layout of Solomon's temple when you read about the construction of the temple in Exodus, and because Solomon's temple is the sine qua non of Masonic ritual. Masonic ritual is heavily based on the Temple of Solomon. But essentially, you have the tabernacle in the wilderness, and then you have the temple. And the temple, and even the tabernacle, was situated this way. The high priest would enter into the Holy of Holies but once a year, there to commune with God. And this has very big bearing on Golden Dawn stuff too. He'd enter into the court, and there would be the altar of burnt offering, right? You not just offer something by cutting its throat, but burning it to ash. So there's your fire. You move on to he would then go to the brass laver of purification and cleanse himself. There's the water. And then he would enter into the Holy of Holies and see you know, in the center of the room would be the altar of incense, right? And that's kind of that's represents the air element. But you have fire, right? So sacrificing the animal part of your nature, water purifying yourself gradually so that you may enter into the Holy of Holies. And then the final step is incense, and incense ascends like prayer. And there the priest humbled himself and prayed. And then, you know, having passed through the veil, right there is the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, and on it sits two cherubim, right, with their wings kind of enfolded over it. And when you read the instructions God gave to Moses, he says it is between this point, between the two cherubim, that is where I'm going to talk to you. And so it's this whole process of essentially, right, because God would appear, the presence of God would appear as the Shekinah, the holy presence, you know, the divine spark. So you're essentially being brought to light, but this is the sequence. This is the path, right? You first have to sacrifice the animal parts of your nature. In Masonry, it's divesting yourself, you know, and taking that rough ashlar and chipping away at it to make it, you know, true and the perfect cube. And steps of purification. And then finally, obviously, humility, kneeling and praying. So yeah, Freemasonry has it. The Golden Dawn certainly has it. It permeates. That is the system. That is initiatic theurgy. You know, of it's all given right there. It's in all of our traditions, and I think Freemasonry. I would say the thing that I like most about Freemasonry is that you have to learn all these beautiful words, and just get them into your head. In most jurisdictions in the state, you know, it's all memory work, and you have to deliver a catechism. You get with a coach after your ritual, and it's 15 minutes of dialogue that you have to learn from mouth to ear. But it really gets these principles just burned into your, you know, it really saturates what I would call your sphere of sensation. You're really, really steeped in this stuff in Masonry. That's another beautiful part of the transformation.
Well, you're going to be unhappy to hear this, but, and so are other Masons out there, but I'm excited about this fact. The new lodge I'm joining, we don't have to memorize the vows. They got rid of requiring people to memorize those. And I asked why, of course, because, you know, I mean, you know, I can memorize things. It's, but the answer surprised me, because I know a lot of friends of mine who would be like, no, you should definitely have to memorize your vows. But no, the answer was awesome, because this is like an old hardcore. The guy I was having lunch with is also the charter signer of the SRIA for Canada.
Oh, wow.
Though he considers it to have gone to hell in a handbag, and this, I think I shouldn't probably say this stuff, but anyway. So the reason we don't memorize the vow, he said, is because he just thinks there's more important things to memorize. So if they have only so much memory of their new people, their new candidates, that's not the priority, I guess, is the thinking. And then, you know, you can always go memorize it if you want, right? And if other Masons are shaming you for not having your vows memorized, I mean, maybe go memorize them. I don't know. We'll find out. It'll be well, fun, I look forward to sharing the journey with everybody who's interested in hearing about my strange Masonic journey. I joined originally because it would make my grandma happy. Because my great grandfather was a Mason, and we came from a long line of Scottish Masons. They came over to Scotland 3 generations ago, and my Irish family came over 2 generations ago, and then my dad and mom connected and made me and my sister, and you know, so we were this strange blend of Scottish Freemasonic lineage with this Dublin bloodline that fled the Irish, the Easter uprisings in 1915. You know, right in time before the shit really hit the fan in Ireland. So, you know,
I mean, I've said it on my podcast when we had a talk, but you were made for this. Like, you were destined to become an occultist.
Man, me and my sister both enjoyed the Golden Dawn a lot. My sister's I just found my sister's Eastern Star stuff.
Oh, wow.
Star booklet. It's right down here next to me. Yeah, maybe I can find it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and she and my mom joined Eastern Star while I was, away living and studying in Ireland and working there. And I didn't even know until later on. I guess they knew I had done the first degree of masonry, and then I guess they checked it out. And because of our grandfather, great grandfather, they got in, and they left it pretty quickly. They found it extremely misogynistic and sexist, and didn't like it at all. Oh well, oh well. Yeah. So Chris Roberts is asking, what's that in your pipe, brother, with a halo emoji? No need to answer that, of course.
No, I've got a wonderful Balkan blend from Sasani. It's really nice. I am really. I used to be a Virginia guy. Tobacco we're talking about here. I used to be more into Virginias, but I smoke too fast. You're not supposed to puff like I do, like a steam train or something. And Virginia tobacco, because it's got such a high sugar content, so sweet, it's delicious, but it burns super hot. So I end up steaming my tongue. So I'm trying out Balkan stuff, and it's actually really, really enjoyable. I don't know if the person who asked that is into tobaccos, but this is the original formula, the Balkan pipe tobacco mixture by Sasini.
I like that you responded to the question by giving a sincere answer that an aficionado would appreciate, right? That's nice, especially these days, because there's so much smoke shaming going on by people. It's like, everyone likes to shame each other for the vices that they don't happen to have.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like everybody just kind of assumes that I'm smoking weed. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I'm sober. I've got 2 vices left. Well, 3. Pipe tobacco, coffee, and hyperbole. I talk way too much. Those are my 3 vices.
Well, we're young yet. We can always get some more.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. But thinking about one of the things that I want to do, actually, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, the theme of this episode, but I'm going to start growing tobacco in my backyard and some grapes. I might start making my own wine.
Nice, yeah. I think anything people grow is good. It doesn't matter what you do. I don't have the ability. I don't have a backyard, so I compensate for that sort of itch to connect with nature by making things out of wax. I'm getting really into that for just for fun, like that's pure awesome. Hobby, pure. I've got I'm making this abramelin, beeswax abramelin salves and balms.
Yeah.
So that, because I like balms and stuff that's not just oil, but it's also that I can put on my skin, because I have psoriasis, so it's really good for my skin to have coconut oils and beeswax oils sort of mixing into my skin. It's really good for that. So yeah, and why not? And throw in the oils for the abramelin and have a bit of extra juiciness to it. That's a nice way. Yeah, growing wine and tobacco, growing grapes and tobacco. What a wonderful thing to be able to do. We have the space.
We grow a lot of stuff here. We had a homestead out in the country on 2 acres, and we just recently moved. We're a little bit more suburban now, but still kind of rural. And so we've got some land. We grow a lot of vegetables, but I was, even in the Golden Dawn, like for the mystic repast and stuff like that, that we all partake in together at the end, there's something about I want to be able to create from, seed to sacrament. Really, I want to be able to create my own sacramental wines and things like that, especially in terms of the mass, the Eucharist that I get. And I'm working with some. It's going to take some time, because getting a sourdough starter to like start making your own bread, it's essentially like a child or like a pet. You have to, it needs a certain amount of attention daily. So I'm a little reticent to commit yet, but these are kind of the next things. I mean, that's what happens, right? You start out as a guy living in the city, bartending and going and joining bands, and then you join the Golden Dawn and you become a Christian and you grow your own grapes and you smoke pipe tobacco. It's like you just revert to like, I don't know, I've become more of a hobbit. But simple life.
Well,
There's nothing wrong.
that's not a hobbits kind of had it all figured out,
Yeah,
to be honest. So
for sure.
not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Simple agrarian existence in a magic hobbit hole. Yeah, I've always wanted to have a hobbit hole recording studio and all that.
Ah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. A friend of mine who I grew up with is an environmental architect and has always offered to design it for free. She's like, oh, I could design the shit out of that to make it cool, but energy efficient and all. Like, that was like, yeah, that was a dream. I had many dreams. We had many plans, my sister and I, for the future. And so now it's weird. I have to reconceive of everything. Anyway, let's not get into that. But this fellow says, Chris Roberts says again, cardiologists say coffee is good for your heart health. So maybe 2 houses. You know, I did hear, Chris, recently a lot of experts on YouTube, because that's where all experts are. Saying that coffee is very bad and causes ADHD. Anyway, I don't know. Who cares? Life's short. Do whatever you want. And I did, though, cut out morning coffee. I cut out coffee now. So I switched from coffee to protein shakes and kettlebells, and, you know, need to stay healthy since I'm the only one left. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's and that should be part of a good magical practice. You know, I truly believe that. I believe that if you know, the biggest thing about becoming, there are many, I'll put it this way, there are many responsibilities that one may not be aware of before taking a 5-6 obligation. There are many responsibilities that come with the title adept, you know, whether it be nominal or something earned. But I think one of the most important, immediate, urgent is to be an example to your temple. You know, and I think that part of that is, you know, caring for yourself, right? Because there's a sophrosini to that, right? There's a balance to that. There's an equilibrium. And if that's the whole thing of the Golden Dawn, is that it's truly, it's a middle path. You know, it's the middle pillar is the one that the adept you know, bears the light up and down. And so I do think, yeah, you know, and I struggle with it too. I gain weight in the winters and things like that. I'm not always easy on myself. I think Golden Dawn adepts, in order to get to the level of proficiency, we have to be hard on ourselves. So we're kind of hard on our bodies and things like that. But there's definitely something to be said about incorporating overall physical, mental, emotional well-being into magic. And I think that actually that ties in with Freemasonry. And even if we go back to Neoplatonic theurgy, right? The first step is learning to divest yourself of vices and superfluities. And that's why the first rung of the ladder of virtues, right? The ladder that was supposed to make you a ritual theurgist in antiquity, the first rung is the natural virtues. There's not a lot written on that because, I mean, these were people who were, you know, the Platonic Academy, they would go to the gymnasium first and then go talk in the academy. So it was less of a thing that you really had to, people were just more well-rounded in that sense. They took better care of themselves. But so I think it's even more important today, you know, and I mean, you're doing great things too. So we want to extend people like you. We want to, you know, I view what you do, even though you might, like me, kind of do it somewhat, you enjoy it. So some people might conflate that with the selfishness, but I really do see it as a little bit of a higher calling. You're serving people by creating these dialogues that they can listen to and learn from and kind of, you know, sit in on, be a fly on that wall. I really truly think that the caliber of practitioner that you typically have is a service to people that are trying to find their way in magic. So, you know, stick around, man. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, you know, one of the interesting things is I enjoy it. but it took a long time. I went through it was a very long time where there was no sweetness in my life, to use the language of St. John of the Cross, and during that dark night of the spirit, God removes not only the sweetness, but even the faith that God is still there. It's I'm sure this was a source of inspiration to the whole interpretation of crossing the abyss and having your higher self withdraw, and all of that. But I like the John of the Cross approach. I think Dark Night of the Soul explains the two dark nights more properly: the dark night of the senses and the dark night of the spirit. There is no Dark Night of the Soul. That's the name of the book.
Right.
There is no Dark Night of the Soul, except in the pop cultural way people say, I had a Dark Night of the Soul. That's fine. That's the pop cultural interpretation based on the book title. But what John of the Cross talks about is the Dark Night of the senses, which comes first, and the Dark Night of the spirit, which lasts for fucking years. And you just lose all faith in God. And the challenge is, do you keep faith? Just like in the Dark Night of the senses, you lose all the sensual pleasures and joys from your spiritual life. And the challenge is, do you keep doing it? And that usually I find in Golden Dawn happens to someone between Portal and 3-8 and 5-6.
Yes.
But has to end before 5-6 generally.
Portal.
And a lot of people have a hard time with it there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a question for you. Do you guys use the Stella Matutina rituals, or do you use like Alpha et Omega, or
at Temple Tahuti, we just this was that existed in the 90s up until I closed it in 2003. Autumnal equinox 2003, we shut it down, and well, I did, and so we only had Regardi's rituals back then. Really, that's all we had. I know there was obviously people went to England and brought had manuscripts that they copied and stuff like that, which explains why we were taught so many things that were unpublished, but that I thought that they made up. But now I see the manuscripts and I'm like, oh no, they were, people have been going to London and copying those documents for a very long time. It's not like that just started happening in the last 20 years. So that's interesting. But yeah, we used the Stella Matutina rituals. We didn't see ourselves as trying to be the thinking in the order was definitely, though, to try and be a pre-schism GD. Like, the idea was to be very dogmatic in a way, as much as could be at that time, and which is why we actually didn't have people. I get a lot of people like to insult me by saying that my grades above 5-6 are fake. It's like, they're not fake. We didn't have grades above 5-6 in our order.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't have them. We didn't do them.
And
we used those titles for administrative purposes, but there was no initiations or curriculum after 5-6. Our idea was that, the original Golden Dawn didn't really have those things developed.
No.
So why don't we just at 5-6 say everyone's equal? Then there's no power plays between adepts, and everyone's just equal. And the culture within our inner order was beautiful. I mean, people might be surprised to hear me say that if they know some of the trash talk that went on, but no, it was amazing. There was a few, one guy sort of spoiling it for everyone else, and that's why adepts kept leaving, and that's why the order eventually failed. But I look at orders as pressure cookers, especially, and I think that they often are there to serve their purpose. Part of this thinking comes from Frater Ka, who founded our temple, and he has a very, very much this kind of belief that these things come together, take shape, create adepts, create solar beings who then, and then the pressure cooker erupts and everyone's cast like sparks into the darkness to either continue to burn or die out as they see fit.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing. I kind of balk when people want to be so, pre-schism, golden, or even like really early days. Like, if they're not using the Z formulas, it's just kind of like, older is not always better, right? Because if the original class of adepts were like, okay, we've put together these rituals based on the cipher manuscripts, and we think we can do better. It's like why would you not use their innovations? But to your point, there were no rituals higher than 5=6 in the original early class, at least not that I know of. And what I really like about the Stella Matutina rituals, believe it or not, is that, you know, Felkin had Neville Meakin sort of rewrite a lot of the stuff, particularly the portal ritual. And he sent me, I don't know if Meakin rewrote the portal ritual before or after this, probably before, because I think he died pretty quickly after, but Felkin sent him to the continent to study with Rudolf Steiner when he didn't have the time to go and do that. So there's a lot of Steiner in the Stella Matutina Golden Dawn culture, you know, and like the things that they were then teaching people like Regardy, people like Dion Fortune, and Paul Foster Case and stuff like that. So you get a lot of Steiner in the Stella Matutina culture, because that's who Felkin believed to be, you know, the secret chief, the continental chief of the Rosicrucian inner order. So, you know, whether that's real or not, he still spent a massive amount of time learning from him and then incorporating that into his various temples, which I find very, very interesting. I'm doing a part 2 on the YouTube channel on Arcanum of the history of the Golden Dawn. I did part 1 a couple of months ago, took some time off to finish up these books and get them into the publishers. And but I'm going to be covering a lot of that. That's going to be not this Friday, but the following. That'll air on the channel.
Yeah, I look forward to it. That's great. You know, Nick Farrell shares in Beyond the Sun some of the 6=5 exercises, which I've been working on ever since I got that book a few years ago. And some of them are difficult and some of them are manageable, and I've learned a lot from them. But one of them is literally straight from Steiner, and I know that because we were taught it in grade 3 or 4 in Waldorf school. Like, we would go out to the playground and practice this exercise.
Wow. That's awesome.
On objects in nature. Yeah. It's very, yeah. So there is a lot of Steiner. I think we still don't really know how much Steiner and Felkin and Meakin all really connected. I think Farrell's pretty pessimistic that there was any positive connections between those guys, but I think the jury might still be out. Also, I haven't read, I have it there, Samuel Robinson's Alois Mylander, A Rosicrucian Remembered, which is definitely a revolutionary sort of text in our understanding of Steiner and where he got his goods from. Because he was Memphis Mizraim Mason, right? Which may have even meant that it included DMT and perhaps in its ritual, though probably not at that stage. I think it did at the beginning, of course, with Cagliostro, but not by Steiner's time. But Kellner, you know, Steiner took a lot of stuff from Kellner and the original OTO, the pre-Crowley OTO with Franz Hartmann and all of those fellows. And Steiner sort of kept that as the secret teachings and dribbled it out to the Anthroposophical Society. Like, after he died, the Anthroposophical Society, the executive board in Gornach, they basically decided that there could be no more initiates and that Steiner was the only initiate, capital I, and that anyone else who claims to do any of these things or be any of these things or have any of the experiences Steiner was teaching people to have, to be frauds, which I noticed even growing up in Waldorf school, because the more I progressed on my spiritual path, the more upset the teachers got, because they're like, that's for Steiner and just for Steiner. How dare you have the ego to presume you could do what anything Steiner did? There was definitely some of that mentality amongst Waldorf school teachers. And that was the same mentality that the executive board of the Anthroposophical Society used to basically oust Valentin Tomberg, who was absolutely the heir apparent and the most beloved of the teachers in the anthroposophical movement, even though he was really only focused on the Christic and spiritual side of anthroposophy, which Steiner didn't, which Steiner appreciated, but a lot of it for Steiner is about teaching children, growing biodynamic farming and foods. Like, Steiner did not. That's the cool thing with Steiner. It wasn't just all about the obtuse, highfalutin mysteries. He wanted changing the world. He cared about how you grow your food, what food you eat, how you teach kids, right? He's like, don't force reading on them. They'll read at their own rate. As a result, we have a higher reading competency in Waldorf school than any school in the world. Even though a lot of us don't start to read till we're in grade 4. I didn't read my first novel till I was in grade 5. But by grade 8, we have like head and shoulders statistically above any other school, just by letting kids read at their own pace.
Yeah, because you have no, because
it also allows the emotional aura to fully develop, in Steiner's opinion.
Yeah, you have no aversion to it. You know, you'd have you're not avoiding it because you're being forced to doing it. You're just kind of taking it on yourself at your own rate of development. So there's joy in it instead of feeling like a chore. But I appreciate what Steiner did, and yeah, I know that Neville Meakin lived there and learned from Steiner. I don't know how much that. I still have to figure out, you know, he died pretty randomly, but the cool thing about Steiner is that he did kind of go off and do his own thing, right? Because he was part of the Theosophical Society. I think he was like the head of a chapter, and he broke with them, and then I'm pretty sure. So Nick Farrell and I actually had a conversation pretty recently. Well, it was a couple months ago. We talked about.
How'd that go?
It was great. It was really great. And people really liked it, so I'm happy because you never know. You know, you never know if people are going to like something. But there was a really, really excellent response.
I just never care.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it's nice to see when it's nice to see when people get out of a. It's nice to see that people get something out of a conversation where, like, you know, you can log off and be like, I don't think that went well at all, you know, like, and then, you know, and then like all of a sudden people are messaging you and they're like, that was one of the best conversations on Theurgy I ever heard. And I was like, well, my palms were sweaty the whole time. I don't think that person liked me, but, you know, that wasn't that kind of a conversation, but it went really well. But we started out kind of just out of the gate talking about how Steiner renounced Rosicrucianism at a certain point. He was telling me about that. And he didn't really know why, but I see a lot of Blavatsky and I see a lot of Steiner, obviously Blavatsky, but there's a lot of Steiner in, you know, I want to say that 1930s, right before the Second World War, that kind of occultism that gets like, you know, essentially it will turn into the New Age, you know, but it ends up being really cool. That's the cool thing about the Golden Dawn. You see little people there's so many players, so many characters, right? You talk about Kenneth Mackenzie, Fred Hockley, talking about, you know, their influence on the cipher manuscripts. And then you've got, you know, the German adepts of the Ordo Golden Rosenkreuz and the way that they influence the SRIA that comes through in the Golden Dawn, the structure and the titles and all that stuff of the actual order. And you've got Anna Kingsford, who very well may have been Sorer SDA, you know, Fraulein Sprengel. You've got Steiner, who comes into play with them, and then through Steiner, Mailander, right? Because he was Karl Kellner's teacher. So like, and then even in one of, I think either Mathers or Westcott, they were delivering an order lecture, and they point out that like, oh, the seal of Eliphas Levi is on our cipher manuscripts, and it incorporates like the whole cast of Western occultism around that time. And it's just a really fun history to immerse yourself in. That was the reason why I got so into Golden Dawn history. It is fascinating. It's got some of the coolest shit that you're just not going to find. And I did like a full scale study of, you know, German and French Rosicrucianism, and then how that kind of dovetailed into the Italian orders, you know, Memphis Mizraim. We talked about that, and the order of Memphis and the order of Mizraim, they're coming together and stuff like that. But, and it's great and it's fun and there's a lot of cool people, but to me, nothing is as like cloak and dagger. Here it is, the new age of well, not the literal new age, but a new class, really, this burgeoning moment in Western occultism. It's so incredibly fascinating.
And it's funny how we call it occultism, isn't it? Even the word is so new.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It's French.
like
Yeah.
that's not actually what it is. It's just become a useful word,
A
like
bracket term.
you know, like esotericism. Yeah, and that's, I think, it's funny to see people who are completely new to this stuff try and grapple with the word the word occult, because not
Yeah.
only is it an unfamiliar word to most people, and they think it refers to knowledge instead of forces, traditionally, which it doesn't, and then then it has the word cult in it, right? And it's
Right.
like, well, that's a bad thing, right? It's like, yes and no.
Yeah.
Depends what kind.
Yeah.
It depends if they are injecting you with cyanide or not, or
Right.
making you do things, versus like just simply a group that cares for the gods,
Right.
cultus deorum, which is what any religion is at all. So
Mm-hmm.
and I think the comedian, the comedian point of about the difference between religion and cults is very good, right? Joe Rogan's point, like, in a cult worships a guy, in a religion that guy's dead.
I like that. Yeah. I mean,
Simple. It's simple. It
that's the thing.
works.
I mean, if you think about it too, especially now in like in the corporate world, right? Because that even the word corporate indicates a body, a living thing, right? When you incorporate a business, you create like this own. So you're going around creating all these egregores, and then like when they become as big as like I don't know, Nabisco or I don't know, PlayStation. These massive. These are like our modern priest classes, our modern, deities. I mean, Neil Gaiman would, and his American Gods kind of touch on that, but everything kind of becomes a cult nowadays. Like everything, it has some kind of level of fascination, obsession, loyalty, aesthetic, imagery. That word magic, right? That like the power of words. We might call it neuro-linguistic programming. Agrippa might, just might incorporate that into his theory of language. But it's, something as simple as like, oh, do we have any Band-Aids? Well, Band-Aid is a brand. It's just a bandage. But you know what I'm talking about when I say Band-Aid. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though that's not the
Of course,
name
I
for
got
the
my
thing.
Kleenex. I got
Yeah,
my Kleenex. My Kleenex.
exactly. So
Except
I
no
mean,
substitutes.
everything's kind of a cult nowadays, where, and I feel like people are, if not in word, then in deed, are just embracing it, like fandom is a cult.
Well, yeah, I think you're making me think about it like this, that, occult it used to predominantly refer to secret forces, occult forces that we can't detect through normal means.
Right.
And now, and the idea of egregore has gone mainstream these days, pretty much, even though it comes out of the Golden Dawn more or less. This whole the whole word, and the concept. I think the word appeared before the GD, but
It
not
did.
much.
Yeah,
Definitely was popularized.
it's a Greek word, egregori, and all it means is watcher.
Egregore comes from that.
Yeah.
You sure? Wow. Okay, I didn't know
I'm
that.
almost
That's very
100%
cool.
positive. Yeah.
Sure. Well, let's go with that. So, like, the awareness of egregores, or of the conceptual shape that ideas and ideologies and constructs become, excuse me. We're aware of that now. People are more aware of that, right? Human beings are aware that there are these conceptual structures or stories that we tell ourselves, right? Is the postmodern observation that all these things are stories, essentially.
Yeah.
So you have to, the cultus deorum then is the care of the story. You have to care for your story. You have to care about it, and it has to be a good one. It has to be a true one, perhaps. Oh, that's blasphemous to say, I think, these days, right? Because we all have our own truth, and we do.
No
We do
truth.
have our own truth. There is all there is the event of truths, as I would always used to say, the event of truths, and it's a fucked up way of thinking about it, but I like those sort of approaches to these things. So everyone's aware that now they have to be a part of some story, either intentionally or they're going to be sucked into one unintentionally, and they have to care about that story and take care of that story. Otherwise, it kind of falls apart. But that's where we get into the problem with identifying with the story, because that story is an object. And if you identify with it, you actually cease to be a full person. You fracture yourself in two, and part of you is who you are, and part of you is the part of you that identifies with the story. And that's a schizoid sort of thing. I'm not a therapist, though. Well, I'm not a psychologist, so take that for what it's worth. I have many questions for next time I talk to some psychologists, that's for sure.
Well, what do you think about the idea of, do you think it's actually possible for somebody to self-initiate into the Golden Dawn by like contacting its egregore, right? Maybe thinking about it, donning the garb, using the symbols, using the rituals, or do you think they have to be put through an initiation by, qualified adepts?
Well, there's the Golden Dawn manuscript that talks about self-initiation. You know the one I mean?
I mean, I know that there's what do you call it? Chicken Tabby did the self-initiation green book, but I don't. Is there like an original document from like the 1800s or something
that very briefly in the middle of other things says how you self-initiate using the approach? Yeah, I did a whole lecture to my weekly class on it. It's very interesting, but it still draws a distinction between like self-initiation. Of course, you can self-initiate using the Golden Dawn tradition. The Golden Dawn tradition is a wonderful tradition to self-initiate with. That's what I do. A lot of my weekly work is helping people pursue that path of self-initiation, whether it's using Golden Dawn tradition or the Enochian tradition or some other tradition, right? I got a student who's into the Jack Grail's Hecatian tradition. It's wonderful. We all work very well together, and it all blends quite nicely into our weekly classes of theory and practice. But that you can't self-initiate into the Golden Dawn, just like you can't become a Freemason by reading a book at home on Freemasonry, just like you can't lose your virginity by jerking it to porn. That's my take.
Yeah. I think that's
right. It's just not the same thing. It's not a bad thing necessarily, no judgment, but it's just not the same thing. So yeah. Like, am I a Mason because I just read a book and said I am? No, that's because I haven't joined that group. I haven't had that experience. It's very simple. It's the same thing with the Golden Dawn. If you want to be initiated into the Golden Dawn, you have to be initiated in the Golden Dawn. And the tradition is so, like, all the leaders of the tradition are very, very liberal minded about what that could be these days. Like most of them, rather than telling you to struggle to find a group that's not going to mistreat you, will say just find people who want to start a group and start your own.
There you go.
We need more of that. And if you do it right and stick to the traditional way, if you distort it and change it, then you're screwed. As far as I can tell, because just things don't work that way. But if you do it and you work it properly, the spirits that run the show behind the scenes will show up and start teaching you stuff. How else do you explain Golden Dawn magicians in different parts of the world who have no contact with each other, no access to original source material, being taught things by the angel of the order that turn out to be in the original unpublished manuscripts? There's no explanation for that, right? Something that me and a lot of my fellow adepts from different temples from here, also from Frater R.C.'s Thuban temple, because I worked with a lot of those people who fled him, and a lot of us do some of the same have always done or started doing after many years. We started doing with the Leolam. Well, first of all, the formula of 10 crosses is something that was figured out. Also I don't know where we got that from. It's traditional. This is traditional, right? But then we all started at the end raising it up for Amen, Leolam, Amen, and raising it up towards our Kethersphere. And then I noticed Adam Jonathan did a whole blog where he showed that was actually a traditional, original way of doing it. But it seemed natural to so many practitioners. Yeah. So there's another thing that practitioners, many of us, felt called to start doing and just automatically started doing. And lo and behold, Adam Jonathan's done a whole brilliant blog article. His blog's amazing on that having been a traditional approach. So the spirits and the spirit will guide you if you follow them. If you change things up, then you're no longer communicating with those spirits. You have to find other spirits that are into what you're doing. And you can do that.
Yeah.
You can do that. Why not?
Oh yeah, it's easy. Well, you be careful your definition about spirit, but you don't know what kind you're getting. There's certain, I would say there's certainly plenty of a specific kind of spirit right now that's just hanging out like on a street corner waiting for somebody to come by. But yeah, it's really interesting. I noticed things like that as I came, as I started to travel and meet more adepts or inner order members within the tradition, is that certain and it's interesting to talk about, because it's these kind of ideas that I thought were original to myself, these insights that I thought I had kind of come upon in the course of my studying and understanding. I began to realize that there was a specific kind of magician that actually had the same, like, it seems we had learned the same thing, and that can be a really jarring thing, because it feels very intimate. It feels very personal, like to have this specific understanding of something. We talked about, like, yeah, we all have our subjective truths and stuff like that, but it's very interesting to find when there is a very specific type of person that has they share that intimate insight that you kind of feel came, I didn't feel like it, felt almost like I had it was revealed through work and contact and that sort of stuff. I wasn't necessarily studying a lot of this stuff to try and figure it out. Just by doing, you have certain insights, you have certain revelations, and to find other people that have had those same revelations, that are working in the same system that you're working in, is like, have I stumbled across capital T truth? Like, is this, like, what are we dealing with here? That was a very, if kind of hearkening back for a second to my magical progression, things like that, these very interesting synchronicities that really defy probability, even statistically, they they pull you in. They make you more and more, I've been a believer now for a long time, but affirmation along that path is also, I think, really powerful. And I think it comes as a consequence of dedicating yourself to the work, which the Golden Dawn is a great system to do that too, because in a Freemasonic lodge, there's nothing wrong with this. I love Freemasonry. You get a very broad sort of, okay, here's what you should be doing. Sometimes that involves catechism. Sometimes that involves charity. The rituals will always say to, chip away at the rough ashlar and make that analogy of sort of, rectifying yourself. But they don't really tell you exactly how to do that. The Golden Dawn, on the other hand, comes with curriculum. It comes with, exercises and things like that. So,
and observations that we look for to know that you actually learn the technique. Like, if you show someone to do a God form technique, right, and there's many ways to do those techniques that we have available these days, so with all the communication going and bridges being built between all of us, there's like, everyone used to have one or two ways they would do a God form, and now there's like all these great different ways. Some of them even going back to Iamblichus or Plotinus, I think, one that Nick Farrell posted on his blog. Good stuff, Nick. Thank you, brother. Yeah, awesome. I use that a lot now. There's so many cool ways, but in the Golden Dawn, we're still looking, and then we'll ask the student, we're looking for experiences. What are you experiencing? And once you've got it down, you're going to have an experience that everyone has, that confirms that you're doing it right. Just like a lot of people can't imagine the fact that we actually have to go into the temple, do a ritual with another adept or two watching us to confirm that we and prove that we can do it, not just by rote, but successfully achieve the result, which is wild to a lot of people. But that's what the Golden Dawn is. It's a magical school. It's the closest thing we're ever going to have to Hogwarts people.
I'll put it this way too. I'll tell you, I may have mentioned this before on another podcast, but I remember part of the early Zelator Adeptus Minor curriculum is you sit down. And by now you've done tons of scrying. You've done, you're just saturated in all sorts of rituals and consecrations and, constructions and consecrations of your elemental tools, yada, yada. You've done a lot of that stuff, but then you get, and people are checking along the way. You do talismanic consecrations. You look for certain energies. You look to see if the thing kind of, a lot of times what I find is that it will begin to glow in its complementary colors, and that kind of thing. So there's that. And again, yeah, the God form work, you tested on the God form work. But the really scary one for me was when you sit down and your examiner gives you a symbol and you have no idea what the symbol means, but you have to scry it and come out of vision and tell him what the symbol means. And if you can't do that, you don't pass. So
that's a very
there
cool
was
test.
A lot of trepidation, and you tend to doubt yourself. But by now, you've become so accustomed to creating that interior container where it's like, okay, I'm going to withdraw from me, the persona of Ike, and all the bullshit that's attached to that. And you have that sacred space, that cosmogonical or cosmo, that sort of that act of cosmogenesis that really is the creation of the sacred circle. In even something like the LBRP, you've developed that interiorly, and you begin to recede. And so that's a technique that I wasn't even specifically taught, but is kind of inculcated over long periods of time through the various work, almost like wax on, wax off from the Karate Kid. You don't know that you're learning something. And so I use that space to be able to get away from my fear and get away from my nervousness. And I passed the test on the first shot. And, and it even was like, even my examiner was like, I didn't know if you were going to do this, but it's a real thing, and that is the beauty of the Golden Dawn. It's that these things are actually happening, but the first wall to break down really is, a lot of people will come to this stuff like, I want this to make me a believer. And that's kind of not how it works. I have found that the most powerful magic comes when when it's just assumed. You have that faith, you have that belief, no matter how you possess it or how it comes to you. It would seem right after years of journaling and experimenting and talking to other people, the most faithful can move the mountain.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. The mustard seed.
Yeah.
Idea. Yeah. In magical practice itself, my experience usually is in the mustard seed. Actually, I sort of always think of as that point at which I finally get out of my own way. Where I'm perfectly balanced on that cross of equilibrium, and for a moment I cease to exist, and all that's left is the intention and everything I've built up to that point. And then there's like this snap that I feel ripple throughout me in the universe. And
wow.
Yeah, it's this it's like the mustard seed is myself becoming so small that all that's left is that single point of faith. Right. And everything else is eradicated for it. And if I can achieve that for a second, that's when the rituals are the most powerful, most effective. If that moment happens, if there's some other distracting thought or things like that.
Yeah. And it only needs to be, it doesn't have to be this prolonged thing, right? Like you're saying, it really just takes a moment,
Matt Smurfwharf says all beliefs are doubt. What do you think of that? There's an idea.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard that before. There's a little bit of rhetoric in that.
Someone speaking catchphrases. Rhetoric.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if you believe, if you have to believe something and you have to have faith in it, it implies that it's not already kind of, assimilated into, your just knowingness or something like that. I'm assuming that's what he means, but that's kind of a clever catchphrase that people throw out there, that seems kind of contrarian. There's something to it, but at the end of the day, I think it's semantic. I think we're playing with words here. At the end of the day, I think that, you know, how do you define belief? You know what I'm saying? It's like, and if
Yeah, that's the problem with all trite phrases, sayings like that is, right, a trite saying doesn't define its terms. So what do you mean by belief? What do you mean by doubt? Also, those things, in my opinion, are not the same in every context. So you can't actually have one overarching phrase that has more than a little bit of truthiness to it. But he follows it up and says, you don't believe in your parents, you know them. Yeah, but see, again, you can say, I don't really know my parents.
Right.
I believe I know them. I actually don't know my parents at all, but I believe I know them.
And you know
which
what?
is to definitely say that I doubt that I know them.
And you know what else too?
So
there's a specific amount of time where you have to believe that they're your parents. You know, like you have to willingly be like, oh yeah, you know, they must be. I'm here all the time. They feed me. It's like you didn't have this experience of watching yourself be born. You know, a lot of people, you know, even though it's arguably the most traumatic event in our entire lives, most people don't remember coming out of their mother, you know, like, so it's one of those things where, yeah, you gotta, everything requires some sort of belief. So this is where me and my bishop kind of get into semantics. He says, you know, we dispense with faith because we're Gnostic, right? We know, and Gnostics know. But here's the thing. You don't automatically know to be a Gnostic. You need to engage in the striving and in the path to gnosis. And the only motivating thing that can keep one foot getting put in front of the other, moving you forward day by day, is faith. You have to have faith that there is something to know, and one day I will get there. And if I do these things, X, Y, and Z, that gnosis, that Gnostic moment will come to me. And until then, you know, faith is what leads you up that holy mountain. It really is, because, and I'm not trying to be solipsistic or nihilistic. I personally believe in objective, capital T, truth. You know, I believe in an ultimate sort of creative source, and that is, I would say, a species of intelligence that we cannot fathom. We are an ant on the hood of a car. We do not possess the cognitive faculties to understand an infinite being, and it is hubris for us to pretend that we do. But there's
that's where negative theology comes in, right?
Exactly, the apophatic tradition. But the thing is, you know, and that's another reason to tie it back to Christ. You know, for me, when I pray to the source of all, it can be challenging, even at this stage of my development, my evolution, my journey, whatever you want to call it. It can be challenging to feel overwhelming love because I don't know what I'm praying to. I have a very, very vague, hazy idea. That deity is impersonal and absolute. And the whole idea behind the Christic moment, that event, is that Christ, whether you think of it symbolically or as an actual event, still the same thing. Christ makes the impersonal personal. I can love that being. I can feel that towards, you know, God made man, fully God, whether that's a symbol or whether you believe it to be an actual historical event. So we're a little all over the map, but it's just, you know, brain dumping. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
And so it actually brings us full circle to where we started out with you talking about your own ordination and religious affiliation and experiences. So you mentioned the AGRC and some other acronyms, which I know AGRC, of course, from the 5-6, but can you tell me and then the people listening, the thousands of listeners who will be hearing this on the podcast, and the 19 people here watching us now. Thank you, folks.
Thanks for sticking around.
Please share and like and subscribe and all that stuff. What is the church and religion denomination and all that? What is that? What is all that? I have not heard of the AGRC Church, though it kind of makes sense now that you mention it.
Yeah, so it's AGCRC, way too many letters. The Apostolic Church of the Golden Rosy Cross. So the term, I believe that we inherit from Richard Duke de Palatine and Stephen Heller, is pre-Nicene. So it's pre-Nicene Christianity. That is the technical term for the denomination. So obviously before the Council of Nicaea. So that's pretty broad, right? Because as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different Christianities. So one of the experiments really has been playing with liturgies and seeing how each denomination, or each parish, I should say, is inspired by the Holy Spirit. The same thing that you were kind of talking about before with tapping into the, working with these spirits and stuff like that. It's a very Christian, early Christian thing to believe that, the Holy Spirit, the wind bloweth where it listeth, right? The Holy Spirit goes where it goes, and that grace is afforded by that's the sincerity of your intention is its invocation. And so, we started out very Gnostic. I would say that was probably, I don't know for a fact, but that was probably what most of the church leaders would have referred to it as. Again, a very broad term. We are now working the Carmelite Mass, and we do defer to the Roman ritual on most things. We are orthoprax, so orthopraxy. What does that mean? That means that our praxis, our practice, our actual physical ritual conforms to really Catholic. Catholic, again, like you brought up, is a very broad term. Katholikos in Greek just means universal. But it conforms more towards what you would see. Our liturgy for a long time, and even still, conforms to what you would see if you walked into a Roman Catholic church on Sunday. You would see high mass, you'd see the 7 candles, all the same format, the lavabo, the absolutio, all the typical stuff that you'd find in a Catholic rite, Roman Catholic rite, with some divergences. We play with certain sections and get them to feel right among the clergy there. So more recently, we have switched over to the Carmelite Mass, which is much more. So that was for like, a holy monastic order like the Templars that had a warrior component to it. It's much more chivalric is how I would put the Carmelite Mass. It's not as, I would say it's not as work-a-day, regular Sunday church Eucharistic as the stuff we were doing previously. But we're working through it. We're trying some stuff out, and we're working with the regional and the overarching church leadership to really refine that. And in the process, we're training up people. We just trained 2 new deacons, very enthusiastic, teaching them, how to sense the altar, how to prepare a homily, how to wear your deacon stole, things like that, the basics. And then the last piece really is that the church really comes out of Martinism. This particular, it doesn't actually. What I'll rephrase that. I'll put it this way. Historically, when you look at Martinism, right? Because Martinism wasn't a thing until Gerard Ancos, Papou or Papus, and Augustin Chabousseau created the Martinist order, right, in the late 1800s. And so from that time onward, you usually see some form of Gnostic church affiliated, associated in some way, as a sister organization. They're not technically the same thing, but you will see these things constantly together as you go through even modern day Martinism. And one of the reasons is because Papus actually during that period, shortly thereafter, he received a Gnostic bishopry. He became a Gnostic bishop, a priest, and then a bishop in that period. So the thing is, Martinism historically it comes directly out of the Louis Claude de Saint Martin, right? The namesake of Martinism was trained by Martina de Pasquale, right? And his Elu Cohen, his elect priests of the universe, that Christian, that Catholic, strict Catholic theurgy. It was a lay church, a secret church that ran beside and in agreement with the church, that was charged specifically with exorcising the sphere, the aura of the earth, of demonic influence. So that was very, very, it had this strange Gnostic component when you read the treatise on the reintegration of beings, which a great new translation would be Michael R. Osborne just translated it. Rose Circle Books put it out. I did the audio book. If you want to hear the soothing, sultry tones of my voice, basically go through Pasquale's very, very unique rendering of the first few chapters of the Old Testament. You'll find that there is some strange quasi-Sethian Gnostic interpretation. And the thing is that this guy, he believed in devout Catholicism. He required it of his members. But at the same time, there was this esoteric treatment or exegesis of the first couple of books of the Old Testament that really betrayed this almost Gnostic kind of thing happening. So these two things have been closely aligned from the beginning. And so there is that component, when we offer prayers for intercession and for benediction, we list many of the, Martinist brethren from the past and who are working in the future. And we ask that, that they be with us and be present. And this was something we did for a while in our liturgy, and all the clergy are Martinists as well. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a rule in the church. Ultimately, the church has its own, as I mentioned earlier, it has its own kind of lineage of succession. But I would say those two things are definitely in proximity enough to color each other. So, I mean, that's a very cursory overview of the church. It is definitely Rosicrucian, which again, another broad kind of context. But what's really interesting too is, and I cover this in the book that I put together, is there is some evidence to suggest that Martina de Pasquale, before he founded the Elu Cohens, did receive training in a Rosicrucian order. And we know that as early as 1625 in Paris and Lyon, there was a Rosicrucian presence explicitly. They left a kind of, fama of their own on church doors and sort of like town crier boards in those cities in the 1600s. And we also know that there were the Toulouse Rosicrucians at that point, not too far from southern France, the Languedoc. A lot of that stuff developed.
Didn't know about. I didn't know about that at all when I got I was traveling from London to California with a stopover in Toulouse airport.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was in the stopover, my bank account was hacked. My cards were all discontinued, and I was stuck in France, in Toulouse, and I couldn't get on my flight because they wouldn't let me on with a card. You had to go on with a card. You couldn't pay with cash to get it through. You could get through one gate, but not the second gate unless you swipe your card for an additional $50. So I had to lose my flight, cancel my whole American leg of the book tour, and I was stranded in Toulouse. And I was trying to find if there was any connections to magical things, Rosicrucian Pass and stuff. But they were having some conference that week in Toulouse. So every hotel was booked up. So there was nowhere to stay. So I had to stay outside.
Wow.
Right. So I didn't have much time to look for Rosicrucians. Yeah. Everything was booked. All the hostels, all the hotels, everything for weeks. And my bank was just like, too bad. You have to come back to Canada if you want access to your money. And it was a nightmare. Yeah. I almost died, actually. Of course. If your bank account's taken away by your, and then you're not allowed to go anywhere. Even the embassies were like, tough shit, kid, go die.
Yeah, that's awful.
I wish I'd known about the Rosicrucian stuff, man, because then I could have at least spent my time I had so much time on my hands, right? So I could have just spent all that time doing some filming some little weird ass documentary on Toulouse Rosicrucianism, but I just didn't know because I was I had no access to resources.
Well,
anyway, that's wild. There's a funny story for you. There you go.
Always
have two bank accounts, people. It doesn't mean you're a drug dealer. It means you're smart.
And be prepared to sleep in airports. I've done it a couple of times. I
spent so many days. I eventually got from Toulouse to Paris, and then I was 3 days in an airport in Paris before I finally went into. I said fuck this and went into Paris and got a hostel, and then had some fun there in Paris. While it took weeks. I was stuck in France for a month.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, I had to sleep in the Helsinki airport one night. And it's really weird. It's very Scandinavian. Everything is made of just this colorless white, yellow wood, everything. And the really interesting thing about the airport is that they have motion sensor lights. So I would literally just lay there for 10 minutes and all the lights in my particular terminal would go off. I was completely alone. And then I would turn on my side and all the lights would go back on. It was like a little bit of a nightmare, but it must have been hilarious. I picture it being in a Mel Brooks movie or something like that. But the Toulouse Rosicrucians, there's that famous, story that Harvey Spencer Lewis talked about, him getting his Rosicrucian initiation, which he then brought back as Amorc to the United States from the Toulouse Rosicrucians. It's a really cool story.
Actually, Amorc is the oldest existing Rosicrucian order, brother. That's why they keep suing everyone else who calls themselves Rosicrucians. They are the oldest. Rosicrucianism started in the early 20th century. That's when the Fama Fraternitatis was written and everything. That's why I was about to say, but the name.
Pascal Beverly Randolph was probably the first Rosicrucian in America. But Harvey Spencer Lewis kind of had this really cool story about being initiated, meeting a Rosicrucian or somebody that turned him on to the Toulouse Rosicrucians in a museum as he was killing time one afternoon.
Oh, but wow. Wow.
Yeah. So there's that whole piece, but it looks like Pasquale, he kind of obliquely references, he explicitly says he was trained in a different order. And then you kind of see as you go up and into I think the 18th degree or the 14th degree of his Elu Cohen was the Rocroi, the Red Cross. But it has a lot of consonance with the ethos and the work of the Rosicrucians. It takes less of a Paracelsian tack. Admittedly, he's doing this kind of strange theurgy, but it fits with the time period. So it's something to think about. And it certainly converges on, just historically, I would say the general, the overall flavor of the church, but we're still kind of figuring it out. There's definitely a Rosicrucian, Martinist, and Templar influence. I mean, and even in the Golden Dawn, right? The regalia of the main officers of the Middle Pillar: black, white, red, right? Negrito, albedo, rubido, and you see that in the Templar regalia, the regalia of the Martinists, and the Rosicrucian colors.
It's a fascinating. Kean McGerald says, "I wish there were churches like this near me. I would love to be within a Rosicrucian service." Yes,
well, where is he?
Nice if there was more of these. Where are you, Kean McGerald? I don't know. Maybe they'll tell us. Based on the name, I would say Ireland.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you never know. You just never know.
Nilasagam Mahara Gomaleshkel. He can tell us where he's from. Yeah. Man, this has been such a nice way to spend the evening, brother. Thank you so much for coming on Magic Without Fears. We have a bit more time to shoot the shit, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, man. I mean, it's
so much fun.
We have great combos.
Yeah, we could, yeah. It's so much to cover. Like all the things I thought we were going to talk about, like we didn't talk about any of them. We talked about other stuff, which is totally fine. Why don't we take just give people let's take a 3-minute bathroom break while we go to commercial to remind people about the upcoming EnokiaCon concert.
Yes.
Conference. And so here we go.
Join us in person or online for Canada's only occult conference. Visit Vancouver in beautiful British Columbia and help us leave lockdowns behind us and get back to life. The first of 4 Dee and Kelly conferences over the next 4 years support the Arcane Research Society in bringing excellence in academic scholarship and practical knowledge from some of the best scholars and occultists in the field. Featuring in 2024 this summer, Dr. Terry Burns, translator of Dr. John Dee's famous Monas Hieroglyphica. Dr. Burns has just completed a 52-video course on this mystical text, which you can watch on YouTube for free. Join us and experts Rufus Opus, P.D. Newman, J. Allen Moore, Daniel Rekshan, Frater R.C., and more for this exciting event which will explore the angelic and spirit-filled world of Elizabethan mages, Dr. John Dee and the alchemist Sir Edward Kelly. Learn the secrets of drawing spirits into crystals, conjuration, and Enochian angel magic, as well as the role of dreams and their connections to these other extra-dimensional realities and alchemical transformation. Sign up today to attend online or in person at EnokiaCon.com, presented by the Arcane Research Society.
Cool beans indeed. All right. And we're back. We're back, Jack. I think. Yeah. Here we go. So, yeah. EnokiaCon, we're...
Hey, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Yeah. Oh, you can't hear me? Really? Are you serious? You should be able to hear me.
Cannot hear.
Oh, well. Oops. I don't know why. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. I can just, I can switch to a crappy internal microphone. How does that work? Can you hear me now?
I'm taking requests. What songs do you want to hear spun live?
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you yet. I can't hear you.
You can't hear? Okay, well, that's not me. That's nothing I did. Oh, well. Yeah, I don't know how to fix that. That's weird. Okay, I don't know why. That makes no sense. Yeah. Yeah, you should be able to hear me. My mic's registering and all that. So
1 second.
If something weird has happened, there's nothing I can do about that.
If I can...
Yeah, we'll just have to call it here.
Ah, hey, now I can hear you.
It wasn't my fault after all.
Oh, no. Yes. It was my microphone settings changed.
Oh. Yeah, I'm still new to live streaming, so it'll take a while before my proper setup is in place, since we're reorganizing the entire house because we have to deal with all my sister's stuff and all that. It's just a crazy time. It's we still haven't got her body from Italy. It's taking months. It's taking months and costing crazy amounts of money, and
that's wild.
The whole thing's crazy. Yeah. So yeah, we'll probably won't have the funeral till July, which is weird. So yeah, but whatever. Yeah, so I'm rambling on.
No, I mean, I get it, man. You know, I kind of, this is, it's not, you know, I was, to be honest, I'm happy that we're doing this, but I was definitely surprised when, you know, so I was just kind of, I was like, all right, you know what, maybe we're not going to be doing a podcast soon, and that's absolutely fine. But I'm glad that you.
No, we had to do it. We had to.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you decided to distract yourself temporarily. You know.
I have. Well, I'm constantly having. Well, you know, I'm the only person now here to help out my mother. My sister did a ton for her, and now it's all me. So I've had to make some changes so that I can be even more functional and active just all day, every day to take care of someone in their end of life. And it's a lot. But yeah, so I was going to have a different podcast guest on, but the scheduling was tricky and they were unsure if I was ready to do it again. It's like, I'm sorry, I got to keep working no matter what, like, you know, so, you know, either you, so I got in touch with you and grabbed you, and this other person can be the next guest. And it's a queer witch with a new book coming out. So that'll be fun. I always love talking to queer witches. I had Storm Fairy Wolf on, who I've been a fan of for a long time. And yeah. Queer witches come my way. I'm always happy to talk with you as a fellow practitioner of these arcane arts. Yeah. So I'm excited to, of course, announce that Enokia Con. So we're going to call it, obviously, I mean, I was going to live stream every day last month after, until my sister died, until we sold out the tickets. But that didn't happen because it's been chaos, and chaos is an understatement. I just can't give the details because it's incredibly bad what's going on in our lives now. But we're still going to see if we can hit the minimum attendees to do it in person. We have a week left to do that. I'm going to be pushing hard every day to make that happen. Hopefully we can get a shout out from Foolish Fish or someone in the communities who are influential in that way. We'll see. But excitingly, some of the people attending Enokia Con, whether they said it happened in person or online, either way, they wanted to come to Vancouver. So we moved up the plan to follow up the conference with a little camping retreat, which was always in the plan eventually. But it's like, oh, well, if some of you are coming here to Vancouver, either way, whether the event happens in person or just online, then let's just do it. So we got a 3 days and 3 nights camping trip from Tuesday to Friday after the conference, and camping's very affordable here. You have to book well in advance, so we've reserved the sites. We got room for 18 people to camp, and anyone who wants to join the conference and attend online or in person, if that happens, and come to the retreat, is welcome to. The bottom line is we have no intention of stopping doing this, so it'll just build up year after year, and all the plans me and my sister were making for our futures are now gone. So I guess this is what I'm going to do till I die, because I can't think of anything better. That's for sure. So this is what we're doing. This is my life. Tune in, tune out, or or whatever, you know.
I mean, I get it. I get it. I think it's a really cool. It's a really cool theme. It's a really cool idea. You got some amazing people. You know, I'm hoping that we still do it in person, but I completely understand if that ends up not being the case, because it does have to make sense, actually. But still, we should find a way eventually to hang out in person with one another. If it doesn't, you know, if it's just online, maybe I'll come visit.
You're always welcome to come join the camping retreat. It's going to be beautiful. Yeah, of course. Of course it's going to be amazing. But yeah, the conference is going to be great either way, you know, ideally in person. So, but it's just going to be great either way, because, you know, you're going to present Dr. Burns, all these amazing presenters, Rufus Opus. It's just going to be great, top-notch presentations for that weekend. And we want to build these things, and we want to make them, of course, build them up until they hit that place where they are every year in person and get bigger and bigger. Again, the goal is not to make something massive. Like, we don't want to create some PantheaCon level 6,000. No, we just want a solid group of people, that a community in which both the practical and the academic are both allowed to exist in harmony with each other, or if not in harmony, in dialogue. You know, heaven forbid, things don't have to be harmonious all the time, but we definitely want them to be both interacting, because that's where a lot of the best stuff comes in my experience. So but speaking of conferences, and this you know, the one I'm doing is going ahead either way, and the retreat's happening for sure, and that's going to be fucking amazing. It's all going to be amazing. I'm very excited. And but you're also doing a very cool conference that it would be remiss to not talk about it. Tell people about your conference or a retreat.
All right, so there's,
because you got Hanegraaff.
Yeah, well, technically there's two, and I want to mention both of them. I appreciate you giving me the space to talk about it. So June 8th in downtown Asheville, I was charged by the Asheville Masonic Temple Board with putting together a conference we're calling it the Southeastern Masonic Symposium. And it's basically lectures, presentations on esoteric Masonry and Masonic history from some of the, you know, the top Masonic speakers in the country. Ben Wallace, Jamie Paul Lamb. We have most worshipful past Grand Master Sean Bradshaw of the state of North Carolina is our keynote presenter. I'll be giving a presentation as well. If you are a Mason or not, this conference is open to you. It's also in person and online. If you have any inkling of wanting to, I mean, it's extremely affordable. In person is $90, online is $40. And the value is incredibly high. We're going to be doing the broadcast via Zoom. And if you have any inkling in attending something like this, just go to ikebaker.com, IKEBAKER.com. And there you can preview it and register. And there's even like a really cool, I might have to switch my camera. There's some really cool drone footage that we got of Asheville Masonic Temple as well. So, but I think the one that you're talking about is the New Hermopolis Conference. And that is something, again, I'm a co-founder of it. So, but the idea wasn't initially mine. But I definitely have brought my own kind of thing to what it is that we're doing. And so it's co-founded and being co-organized by myself, Adina Bezarita, and Dr. Mervat Nasser, who founded and created this amazing eco-village in the desert outside of Hermopolis Magna in Egypt. It's called the New Hermopolis.
The pictures are incredible. The place looks amazing.
I can't wait to
imagine a better place to go and die from a snake bite.
Yeah, or just get really horrific diarrhea from eating a banana. You know, because that's traveling for you. Yeah, last Egypt, I think me and my fiance both came home with probably parasites. But the New Hermopolis Conference, it's an international conference, and we're doing exactly that. You know, bringing the top scholars in the field of esotericism together with practitioners. So we have amazing keynote speakers. We have Professor Walter Hanegraaff, Dr. Gregory Shaw, Dr. Shannon Grimes, Roxana Dumitrachi, Mark Vernon, Charles Stang, who heads the Harvard Center for the Study of World Religions. It's really incredible. I never saw myself being a part of something like this, and it's like this got huge real quick. So it's really incredible. Our presenters will include Soledad Davies, myself, for this is for practitioner presenters. Soledad Davies, the astrologer, myself, just to name a few. P.D. Newman, who's also going to be at the Enochia, presenting at the Enochia Con. Jamie Paul Lamb, we'll all be there in person. Marlena Seven Bremner, So we've got incredible practitioners that are also going to be giving presentations. Again, this place is so remote in the desert. It's like this little weird oasis that has like native blue lotus, native olive trees. Dr. Nasser really, she hit it out of the park. It's insane. She's really preserving the ancient heritage of Egypt in this place, but it's very remote. It's about 2 hours through the desert to like anywhere that has like water or a bathroom or something. And then, bringing these people together, there's limited space. So it's actually not open to the public in person, but we're going to have the practitioner track. I'm going to host via ARCANVM, my channel. So that will be live and streaming, or not live, but it'll be streaming. And then that'll be on the weekend of the conference. That's October 24th to the 27th. And then a weekend in November that is to be determined. That is when we will be broadcasting the events that took place. This is truly historic. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. We're the final night on the 26th. We're having a massive symposium where all the professors and the doctors and the practitioners will be together in this space talking about the future of magic, esotericism, alchemy, hermetism. The theme of the conference is ancient wisdom for the future and a new paradigm of the self. And there's several different tracks, re-envisioning the academy, transpersonal psychological, way of utilizing Hermetic philosophy, things of this nature. It's going to be really incredible. You can find out more about that at thenewhermopolisconference.org. Again, you can sign up for a single lecture pass, which is $12. You can sign up for a 3-day pass and see everything. At the final day, the 27th, after the symposium the night before, we're all going to be, all the presenters and the keynote speakers will be traveling to Hermopolis Magna together. And we're going to get that on the ruins of really ancient Hermopolis, of the city of Hermes, the city of the scholars. And so I'll get some footage of that, and we'll also include that in the 3-day pass. So those are, we're live for signing up for registering for that conference, but I mean, it's going to be really something else. And the vision for it is that it is in and of itself a type of ceremonial magic. It's setting the place, bringing the elements together, a grand invocation in this holy ancient place, and the reinvigoration, the re-enlivening of the spirit of Hermopolis Magna for the present day. So that's going to be great. I hope everyone will sign up for that, because I mean, I've not heard of anything that has happened at that magnitude. So it's really a special event, especially if you're a part of these communities.
It's incredible. How did it all come together? What brought that about? As you know, the AnokiaCon conference came from me podcasting with Dr. Burns, and afterwards I was like, yeah, let's get you here. Let's do a thing. And I've always wanted to do a thing since lockdowns ended, which, as you know, in Canada were interminable almost for those of us who didn't, who had health concerns with the thingy, and
the thing that shall not be named.
For 3 years. Like for me, it was 3 years of lockdown, 3 years of not being allowed to work, and I had to somehow manufacture a life that existed online for the first time ever, because I was never an online person. I mean, I put my shit online, but I didn't exist online. I existed as a musician or teacher in the world, doing things, doing real life things, and so to transition to the internet for your primary existence in the world was nightmarish, to say the least. But the upside is now there's like, we're able to do things again in the world, and flight prices have dropped a bit to be a bit reasonable again, albeit maybe they don't the doors might fall off, but at least the prices are lower.
Yeah. That's yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
you're safe with Boeing as long as you don't blow the whistle.
Yeah. There you go. No whistles allowed on the plane.
Just bring your rosary and pray to God.
Yeah. So Adina Bezarita is an Oxford, Cambridge scholar and philosopher, and she was attending conferences with Dr. Nasser, who's also very well known on the scene and created this amazing, eco village in the heart of the desert. And
is he the one who Graham Hancock's always fighting with?
I don't think so. I don't really follow Graham Hancock.
That's a different.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But Dr. Nasser doesn't really seem like she doesn't seem like she would fight with somebody unless it was like a very principled thing. But they were together at a conference, I believe, and the idea came to Adina, like, we should have a conference, a new Hermopolis conference. And the vision just kind of expanded. And it was just that it was the two of them, and it's still very early on. It was just the seed of an idea. And Adina reached out to me. She had been following and kind of commenting on my videos and stuff like that. And, she asked if I would like to participate and become a co-founder of this thing and bring my ideas to the table and to just make it happen. And I'm very, I don't really go, it's very rare that I will go around and kind of like campaign for something unless I'm like super, super excited about it. This I didn't even know about, but when people invite me to do stuff, and this is the Mason in me. And I think everyone here who's like a Mason will understand what I'm talking about. It's very hard for me to say no. So people will continue to rope me into these things, but the plus side is like, part of that is intuition. If it don't feel right, or even if the venue or the setting or the idea is just not clicking, I'll be like, okay, I'm sorry. I might pass you along to somebody else. But this was an immediate yes. And we didn't have Walter Hanegraaff yet. I brought Dr. Shaw in because I'm friendly with him. We've talked on the podcast before. And of course, Jamie and Seven Bremner are friends of mine, and Danny too. But I think Danny just kind of submitted an abstract on his own, and always impressive with him because he's brilliant. But I'm taking care of the digital track and streaming on Arcanum, and I really was, the practitioner thing is really my bag. I'm very much into the academic study of this stuff, and it's. I mean, that's some people. That's how they know me. They only know me as like, oh, that's the guy who does like history and scholarship on these things. But in reality, I'm a magician first and foremost. That's who I am. I just happen to do these other things. So the practitioner track is super important to me and close to my heart. And I kind of had the idea like we got to do a symposium. There has to be, like, aside from when we're just sitting there listening to each other give presentations, we got to sit literally in a circle, maybe after we eat, have a few glasses of wine, and then just talk organically. Let it harken back to the ancient days of, and it's becoming increasingly rare that people from opposite ends of any aisle will sit down and talk with each other for 2 hours. So I'm, admittedly though, a lot of the scholars that are involved are extremely sympathetic to practice, so that's luck. But
it was actually my protege while he was doing his MA, my old best friend and protege from the Golden Dawn, when he was doing his MA years later in Amsterdam with Hanegraaff. Hanegraaff came over to his flat one night where he was hanging with, I believe, Jeremy Crow, his other classmate. And he showed Hanegraaff the LBRP for Hanegraaff's first time, which means like, so he was shown Hanegraaff's first LBRP was more or less shown the way I taught it to my protege. Who's, he's become he's not a good guy really. But he became a dark fellow. But
dark wizard
already knows that. But we all make our choices, eh? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but that's amazing. Just an amazing how that all came together. And of course you said yes right away. That's just remarkable. And so you're going to Egypt, Danny's going to Egypt as well as others, right? Yeah. Well, damn, I hope it keeps going. I'll do anything I can to support that stuff and get the word out, because I want it to keep going long enough till I can make it to those sort of things. Because now I'm definitely locked down to my mom while she's still alive, since she's all I got. And hopefully she survives the next major surgery, so I'm not without family for the rest of my life in 6 months, but we'll see. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Pray for my mom,
well,
folks.
Absolutely. I will be praying. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And my sister's soul.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, we would love to have you eventually. The idea is to keep it going so that we get, it's like, I don't want it to be, I want it to be very, very high. And I think I speak for everybody on the founding committee. We want it to be the highest possible caliber of both scholar and practitioner, but we don't want it to be.
Well, you have Shannon Grimes and Hannah. Sorry.
Yeah. And Shannon's a friend, she's fantastic. So I'm really happy she's a part of it, but we don't want it to be like, we don't want it to be exclusive. In that sense, we want to broaden it so that, not, you still the highest possible caliber, but in order to get the most amount of high quality scholars and high quality practitioners is to keep this event running, because logistically you can only have so many people on site. You can only have so many people submit their digital presentations for the digital track. So, I mean, the idea is to keep it going. It's going to be a success if we it's going to be a success regardless, but it's going to be a continued success if people sign up and, witness this live in action. And we also have videos. We've been doing we've been doing sort of short keynote interviews. Some of them run from 10 to 40 minutes long. We've also partnered with a lot of really incredible sponsors or partners like Psychosematica, which is Soledad Davies' platform for the teaching of Western Esotericism and astrology, the Erurotas Creative Bridges conference that's happening in Oxford this year, that Professor Les Lancaster, who's also the dean and founding director of Aleph Trust, they're our sponsors, and Les is giving a presentation May 19th, and it's open to the public for $12. You can watch this presentation. We just had Dr. Shaw give a presentation. We have John Dillon giving a presentation that you pay $12 and sit in a live Zoom meeting with John Dillon and ask him questions. If you're a fan of Neoplatonism and Theurgy, you definitely know who he is, right? I mean, it's the ultimate translation of On the Mysteries, the Middle Platonists. He's done all this amazing work. So he's going to be doing a course. So it's kind of like it's running all year. We're doing like these really cool events that ultimately culminate in the New Hermopolis. So again, check out the newhermopolisconference.org. I put that link in the YouTube chat, and I put the link to ikebaker.com in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, and you still have no camera, right?
Well, I switched it to my laptop camera. Did that not go through?
Yeah. No, you're not on screen. Okay. I can see if I can tweak that, but we're gonna wrap up soon, I'm sure. Oh no, I can't. Yeah, it's not coming through. But that's wonderful. Like, let's not worry about whether you're on camera or whatever.
Yeah,
whatever. It's all good.
I'm not easy on the eyes, so. So I remember I used to be a bartender. In Manhattan in Hell's Kitchen, and I used to have this one guy come in and just rib me all the time. And one of the funniest things he said, and it's such a dad joke, but it like brought me to tears. I was laughing so hard. He's just like, you know what? You got a really good face for radio.
Yeah, it's classic.
First time I had heard it.
Classic. Yeah. Face for podcasting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And a voice for a police lineup.
Yeah, voice for audiobooks.
Oh man, whatever. Yeah, this has been so much fun. I'm so happy. There's still 20. We had up to over 30 people watching at one point, and we got 20 still now, which is impressive. 3 hours in.
Yeah,
and
real.
We're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and allegedly X.
Oh,
I can't check to see if that's true, but allegedly it's true. So there you go, folks.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure that if anyone comments on X, it'll be very kind and loving comments about us both.
Yeah, that's what it's known for.
But today we got the first time I ever had a Trump comment in my feed. Look at this. Someone named Dwayne Oxner commented. It's on the screen now. Trump 24 ... I don't quite understand what 24 has to do with it. And I'm a Canadian, so we don't really give a shit about what you guys are doing down in the States. It all seems kind of nuts to us. And we have our own problems, as we all know.
Yes. I was just going to say that. You guys are in your own kind of Orwellian hell. but
dude, they're withholding food and Medicare from poor people so that they'll do legal suicide. And this has been going on. It's now our #1 cause of death. 15,000 deaths a year from legal suicide because people are having food, shelter, and medicine withheld from them.
Well, it's legal.
That's what's happening. It is legal. Well, our Supreme Court, dude. I know so Canadians can't post news on social media at all. We can't.
Yeah.
We can't. Yeah. So here's some breaking news. Some of you guys might know. Our Supreme Court did determine that Trudeau broke the law in calling in the Emergencies Act, and he did break the law. So he's now officially a criminal. There you go. Well, this is what happens. Well, tyrants are on the uprise, I guess. More so. So I don't know what's going to happen. Feel bad for the next generations. I feel blessed to have. I remember the day that songs like Black Hole Sun and Zombie first came on the radio, and I recorded them on my cassette tape, and then recorded them onto another cassette tape, then recorded those 2 recordings back onto the first one as a 3rd recording, and then I could eventually make a whole tape with those songs, one on each side, so I could listen to them on repeat on a cassette tape. That's how we did it back in those days, in the early 90s. If you wanted to hear a song on repeat, you had to make a cassette tape with just that song on both sides, or one song anyway. Yeah, I'm glad I got to experience those sort of strange things. Though the current generations, they have their own strange things, and on we go, right? Into eternity.
Yeah. I like to say, I like to make this observation at a certain point. It's that cliche where it's like, every generation says that the succeeding generation, their music is like is a de-evolution or something like that, and I would say that they're correct. they're not wrong, but we like it. Leave us alone.
I mean, we like it. I don't know if that's true, man, because when I was growing up, everyone still thought the best music was in the 70s. And I think a lot of people still think that today. I think the 70s were kind of the height of music, and then the 80s were interesting, got really wild and creative, and then the 90s sort of got back to basics, and the knots were interesting for a while. But what happened to rock and roll and songs with heart and soul? It really did become all about money and I like the Dylan Moore and Comedian bit about music. He's like, it used to be about love and sacrifice and adventure, and now it's like I got my bitches and my gat and my limos and my cheeseburgers powered by limo juice and bang. I love Special Monster.
I love Dylan Moran, man. I love Dylan Moran. He's amazing. There's another quote that I really like. It's from, I believe, Jan Wenner interviewing David Bowie. probably for like the second or third time.
Yeah, that guy used to be cool.
Yeah, yeah.
He was cool. He was cool once, but not anymore.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, what did he say?
Well,
to Bowie.
David Bowie said, and this I think was shortly after his stint in the Golden Dawn. He said, I'm going to paraphrase it because I'll butcher it. He's like, it's been said that rock and roll is the devil's music. He's like, and I'm afraid that that's correct. I'm afraid that that's a correct assumption. So that's always stuck with me, especially like I grew up on rock and roll and heavy metal. And to be honest with you, since my Golden Dawn initiation, I can't listen to it anymore.
Really?
It riles me. It brings me off of equilibrium in a way that it is not good. It makes me aggressive and it makes me anxious. Some people have the opposite effect. They listen to brutal death metal and they're calm. That's not the case for me. I'm very, very responsive to the music. I don't lose myself in the experience of listening to music. I stay consistently engaged because I am myself a musician. And, modern neurology is showing that musicians process music in communication centers. So I'm constant. It's like listening to somebody talking to me. I'm in constant dialogue with whatever I'm listening to. So it's very, very present in my consciousness. And so I've had to really curate my mental diet since I've become an initiate.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's definitely a fact, right? I know what you mean. I do know what you mean. As a musician, I just I think, yeah, everyone's different. People are different. I don't really get the hardcore metal stuff, but I can still enjoy a good metal show. I recently went to see my buddy perform 3 Inches of Blood at the Commodore Ballroom, with 3
Nice.
sold out nights in a row. And he's a brother Mason as well. Maybe I'm not going to say that. Oh well, too late. Sorry.
I didn't know. I didn't know that.
And but the show is amazing. The show is fucking amazing. Like, I don't generally listen to that kind of rock metal or metal. But yeah, I still appreciate the music of it, and especially I love watching musicians perform, of course, because when you play, I want to see their hands, I want to see their doing, and and just the whole integration of every aspect from technical to performative to energy, and it's just wonderful. But I think it is interesting. I still have for me, listening to Zeppelin is a very spiritual experience. Same as listening to Tool or Cat Stevens or Johnny Cash. It's all very spiritual experience for me.
I will say that about the record Lateralis and some tracks on Fear Inoculum, like Pneuma, and so the more aggressive stuff, like I can't listen to Anima anymore because it's a little aggressive, but Lateralis from start to finish was an initiation for me. It really truly was. It got me very, very oriented towards things like Buddhism and Taoist poetry and stuff like that. It had that kind of Eastern spiritual vibe to it, even in the incorporation of tabla, that Indian sort of finger drums. I mean, it just has that flavor.
I know tabla.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. Let's call it here, and we'll do part 2 very soon. It's whenever we have time, and when your camera's working again. But that doesn't really matter so much. People, thank you so much for listening. I think this is a great place to leave it, and I can finally Ike, man, I wish I could see your face, but I will scry the symbol on the screen and see if I can augur your true face. It's a banana. Okay. That didn't work out as I planned. I'll try again next time. Ike Baker of the ARCANVM podcast. Thank you so much for having me on last time. It was a special interview, and I was thrilled that I told you to release. Remember, you were going to release it at the end of the month. I was like, can you release it sooner? Because I'm doing all this promotion, and it paid off. It paid off. Like, I've been running like 30 different occult websites with URLs that people would be shocked to to see how cool these URLs are. Like I have a bunch of things that people don't know about that just gather emails, right? I've been doing this for a very, very long time. So yeah, of course, right? Like occultauthors.com and nokiamagic.com and stuff, like crazy stuff. I have tons of these things. And they gather emails. So I have these big email lists, and then I use that to build up my podcast. And now I'm trying to transfer some of that audience into the YouTube, though I don't really think it's worth trying too hard. Please like and subscribe, but like, it's not worth trying too hard when you're shadow banned. Right. 7 years ago, my Instagram followers were like almost 10,000, and it's dropped down to 5. And that's just shadow banning. That's just suppression, removing things, all that sort of BS. So you can't worry about that stuff. You just got to keep being grateful for what you have, and the fact that you're allowed to be on these things at all, I suppose, because it sure beats standing on a soapbox on the street. And, and this is a blessing. It's a blessing to be alive, and I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to talk with you all. And I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. So yeah, anything you want to shout out, Ike Baker, before we wrap this bad boy up?
Well, shout out to you, brother. Really, honestly, I'm a little curmudgeonly, and I feel like I try to make myself as available to the general public as I can, but it's really been a rare treat for me to talk to you and to get to know you. And I have a lot of love for you and what you're doing. And the EnokiaCon is, what a vision, 4 years building up to Dee's birthday, having the last one in Prague. Let's make it happen. And I'm looking forward to whenever we get to meet in person and have a real meeting of the minds. It's a pleasure to be a part of the legacy that is your podcast, and finally kind of have my name in that roster. That's pretty cool, so thank you. And anytime you want to come on or whatever it is, just don't even hesitate. Just reach out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a blast. And thanks everyone who's listening, and all the people who are going to listen to this. Thank you very much. It's just, the glory of God is every creature fully alive. So go live. Thanks for listening. And you hang out for a second, Ike, and we'll talk offline.
Sure.
Much love, everybody. Light in extension. Kabzam Pact.
Kong Som Pax.
All right. Have a good evening.